Hall,
Present.
Solis,
Present.
Pike,
Here.
Segura,
Here.
Tarantino,
Here.
Aguirre,
Here.
Adamos.
Here.
Okay, with that, now we'll do the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could, a moment of silence so we can remember Congressman John Lewis and all the contributions he's made to this great country as a civil rights leader, congressman from 1987 up till now, up until his recent death. I know his body's laying in state at the Capitol. I just hope we can remember all the wonderful things he did and sacrificed for to help fight racial segregation. He led in the marches from Selma to Montgomery, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and the many things he did. He has a long list of accomplishments in his life. So if we could please remember him in our moment of silence, and let's get to our moment of silence, and then I will lead in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Push your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The board met in closed session preceding this meeting to discuss the following issues. 1, student expulsions. Suspended expulsions, reinstatements, education code section 48916-48918. Public employee, number 2, public employee discipline, dismissal, release, reclassification, reassignment, transfer, government code section 54957. 3, conferences, legal counsel, anticipated litigation in paragraph 2 of subdivision D of government code section 54956.9. Conference with labor 4, conference with labor negotiator, government code section 54957.6. The board took the following action. Moved by Solis, seconded by Hall, to accept the administrative hearing panel's recommendation to approve the reinstatement of 1 student with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Hall, second by Segura, to approve the request for a leave of absence for 1 certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Hall, seconded by Solis, to approve the request for leave of absence for 1 certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Solis, seconded by Hall, to approve the request for leave of absence for 1 certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. Moved by Solis, seconded by Segura, to approve the request of leave of absence for 1 certificated employee with a vote of Hall yes, Pike yes, Segura yes, Solis yes, Tarantino yes. That concludes that. At this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda for the July 27th, 2020 regular board meeting, with the change that the board will first consider board agenda item R1 after the consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Make the motion. Oh, sorry. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Clerk of the board, please call vote.
Adamos,
Yes, A or I.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. At this point, I'll give the San Diego County Office of Education representative any comments if you'd like to speak, Dr. Scavarna.
No, thank you. No comments tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We'll now have an update from our acting superintendent, Dr. Getty.
Thank you, Trustee Segura, trustees, and members of the public. Good evening. Many of you may be wondering, who is this person as our acting superintendent? Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Moises Aguirre. I was born and grew up in the Imperial Valley to very hardworking parents who were farm workers. They were only able to finish middle school in Mexico before coming north to look for a better life and a better opportunity for their kids. I was the first in my family to graduate from high school and college, first to earn a master's degree and a doctorate degree. From my parents, I learned a work ethic second to none. My wife, Jessica, and I have 5 beautiful children, my oldest of whom graduated this year, the year of COVID-19, from a school in our district. And in the midst of this pandemic, I have seen firsthand the exceptional care provided by our teachers, our counselors, custodians, bus drivers, nutrition services workers, campus assistants, clerical staff, paraprofessionals, network technicians, school psychologists, assistant principals, and many, many others who support our schools on a daily basis. What drives me is that I personally know that public education can be transformational, and that is why I feel a passion for the opportunity that education can provide. When properly supported and adequately funded, education truly is the great equalizer in American life. This past month has been extraordinarily busy for our district. We have taken steps to respond to the San Diego County Office of Education regarding the most recent audit conducted by California's Fiscal Crisis Management and Assistance Team, i.e. FCMAT. Also, we have developed an extensive reopening plan that outlines the safety protocols and procedures we're implementing to ensure when we reopen our campuses that we do so in a manner that is protective of our students and staff. Our plan includes starting with distance learning for all students on August 3rd through at least the end of the first quarter. We will hear a lot more about that this evening under item G6. We have also worked together with our teachers and our counselors associations to begin restoring library services and reopening 3 of our learning centers. Also, we will unveil details about our exciting Launch Academy under item G7. Many thanks to our teaching and learning team led by Dr. Ana Maria Alvarez for all the hard work bringing the reopening plans and restorations to life. Additionally, I would like to say a special thank you to the Human Resources team led by Mr. Tom Winters and Dr. Milena Aubrey, who have staffed approximately 200 positions in the last few weeks, when the average in any given year is approximately 50. This work has been very arduous, involving analyzing employee preferences, individually calling employees to discuss their placement, completing employment contracts, adding employees into the system, and notifying site administration. Staffing at the beginning of the school year is always challenging, and this year has been especially challenging. We have begun and continue to recall teachers, librarians, and counselors, as well as staff the 3 reinstated learning centers and the Launch Academy. All of this has come during remote work because of COVID-19. The Human Resources team's efforts have been simply amazing. Also, we appreciate our teachers and counselors who have been so patient during this process. Thank you. I also want to express the district's sincere appreciation to Dr. Tom Glover, who recently retired as our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. We will miss you and wish you and your family all the best. Lastly, I would be remiss if I did not comment on the incredible moment we are living in. On June 22nd, our Board of Trustees passed Resolution 4683, a resolution in support of Black Lives Matter. The foundation of this resolution was laid by the important work of the Equity, Culture, and Student Services team, led by Dr. Joe Fulcher. I'm now pleased to announce that the Sweetwater Education Association and our district have begun collaboratively developing an action plan for attaining measurable systemic change as it relates to the achievement of our African American students. More details about this significant work will be forthcoming. Relatedly, Dr. Vernon Moore, our Chief Compliance Officer, and I participated in an inaugural Filipino Community Town Hall event last Friday. A special thanks to Joanne Fields and Ditas Yamani for organizing the event and serving as moderators. Also thanks to Filipino Press, Philameda, the Lumpia Club, Asian Pacific Islander Initiative, and the Mabuhay Foundation for your support and participation. I am certain this town hall was just the beginning of our renewed collaboration with our proud Filipino community. With that, I truly appreciate the opportunity to serve in a capacity that helps support opportunities for all of our students. I am honored to serve as your acting superintendent. Here's wishing everybody a successful and healthy 2020-2021 school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Getty. And so with that, we will now have a report from Desiree. I know it's your first day, Desiree Adamo, student board representative on meeting with the student ASBs. And if after your statements, if everybody would take some time to welcome her, I would appreciate it. It's all yours, Desiree.
Hi, everybody. My name is Desiree Adamos, and I am an upcoming junior at Olympian High School. I would like to first off say that I am very excited to work with all of you on behalf of the Student Voice. One initiative that students are currently taking is trying to implement an ethnic studies course into all of the schools at this district for the 2021 to 2022 school year because of the events that have occurred over these past few months. And that's all that I have to say. In relation to meeting with the ASB presidents, I have contacted Mrs. Picos, and we will be working on that immediately. Thank you very much.
So I'll start. So I'm really glad to hear what you said just right out of the chute and with ethnic studies, and I'm very supportive of that and look forward to helping any way I can. And welcome, and I know you're doing a fantastic job. We've had a run of really good student reps on this board who give very good input and really, you know, are paying attention and listening, and you know aren't shy in terms of expressing from needs from the students' perspective. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, I too wanted to say welcome and thank you for volunteering for this. And your voice is going to be very much appreciated, especially during this time of COVID and distance learning. So all your input, any information that you have, let us have it. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
Desiree, I concur with Mr. Solis. Let us have it. Tell us what you think. Tell us what the kids want. Tell us what they're thinking. All your prior people who have been on the board have always done that, and they don't hesitate to tell it like it is. And so don't be afraid to tell us what you need to tell us. If we can help, if we can do anything, we'll definitely do it. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to welcome you also, Desiree, and I look forward to hearing. First of all, I am very glad to have another female on the board, so that's one up for me. But I also look forward to, as my fellow board members say, the unvarnished truth, the real advocacy that I know you will bring. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been voted in as the board representative from your, fellow ASB representatives. So I'm really looking forward to a good year. And I am also on board with everything you said about ethnic studies. I think that every curriculum should be expanded in ways that really teach true history and empower the students, and that they understand where their roots are. There's always something valuable and pride to take pride in, and also the resiliency of their heritage. So I welcome that. I think that is what this board is all about. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Finally, Desiree, I also would like to welcome you. And I would encourage you not only to share your point of view and that of your fellow students, but also don't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes the most important items get put forward by the questions that all of us ask. So I'm confident that you'll do a good job. Like Mr. Segura said, we've had a good run of student board representatives, and I'm sure that you'll follow in their example, but yet put your own personal touches on the position. So welcome, and if there's anything that any of us can do to help you out or to give you guidance if you should need it, let us know. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. So let's move to public communications on non-agendized items. This is a point on the agenda where members of the public may address the board on any matter not on the agenda and have 3 minutes each to do so. The Board of Trustees cannot legally take action on or respond to matters not posted on the public agenda, but will refer the matter to the superintendent's office for review and report. Speakers' comments shall refrain from using profanity and shall be presented in a respectful manner. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you. The first comments are from Araceli Picone. Good evening, board members. The district mission states it, quote, ensures a safe, inclusive, collaborative culture that empowers each student to actively engage in a meaningful educational experience to pursue personal and academic success, end quote. It states, we believe relationships and collaboration matter. We believe resources shall be equitably distributed to ensure the success of each student. We believe in the value of community voice in decision-making. We believe in a culture of trust based on integrity and transparency. Keeping 3 learning centers is an obvious sign that we need them. However, this is not, quote, putting all students first, and it's certainly not equitable. The community voices have spoken, and the learning centers serve the students with the greatest academic and personal needs. The 3 centers, San Ysidro, Chula Vista, and Sweetwater, are only serving a limited number of those students. If we are truly putting all students first, why couldn't we keep a small center at each site? It's been challenging enough to get students engaged in distance learning. Why wouldn't we increase the odds of engagement by giving students the connection to their home school and with teachers they already know? Is it equitable to expect students from Bonita, Eastlake, Otay, and Olympian to eventually make the trek to one of the 3 centers? Or from Mar Vista and Southwest, where the connection to their community and school is crucial for engagement? It doesn't make sense. Just like it doesn't make sense that we, all Learning Center staff, invested many days as a program and as a separate committee organizing the optimal operation and efficiency for the centers, only to have nothing come of that collaboration. The hope is that a new leadership will value the relationships and collaboration that has happened, equitably distribute Learning Center services, and truly put all students first. The next comments are from Joe Palmore. I am a retired combat Marine, soon to be a Department of Veterans Affairs retiree and the father of a biracial child. When I was going through my training as a Marine, we were taught that in combat we might encounter the fog of war. This refers to the uncertainty in some situations or the unknowing. As the leaders of Sweetwater Union High School District, I am sure you experience quite a few fog of wars, especially when it comes to making unpopular or difficult decisions such as budgets. However, it should not be difficult for you to support the education needs of our African American students. The leaders of this district like to tell the public that Sweetwater District has the most diverse population of students. If that is true, then why do our African American students feel invisible and unsafe in our schools? They are acknowledged, cheered, and recruited for their sports accomplishments, but are not encouraged or recruited to take challenging classes or cheered on with their academic accomplishments. This smells like bias in the treatment and worth of our African American students, a belief that was established, nurtured, and implemented through religion and policies established more than 400 years ago in our United States to legislate slavery. When you're the parent of a Black child, you worry about everything and every place he/she goes because this country still holds racist practice and racist ideas about Black people. This isn't only a police matter, it is also an education matter. I do not want my child being targeted because of his skin color. I applaud his courage when he shared this with you during last Thursday's board workshop. Yes, Malik Palmore. As parents, we entrust our schools with the safety of our children, but it sickens and angers me to hear what is going on. I understand, though, because this district has treated Black parents in the same manner, invisible, non-existent, or a bother. I write to you to remind you that you passed a resolution supporting Black Lives Matter. What about supporting our students' minds? I watched the workshop last week and was greatly disappointed that there were no thoughts shared about how this district is going to address the trauma that the Black community has endured this last few months, let alone the generational trauma that the Black community has lived with for hundreds of years. What are you doing to support your resolution? As a Black Minds Matter community advocacy group comprised of parents, students, community member, and leaders, we have ideas and want to speak with the superintendent and his staff about them. We asked for a meeting 2 weeks ago and are waiting for that to be scheduled. Thank you. The next comments are from Muhammad Abdi. My name is Muhammad Abdi, a graduate student at San Diego State University. I will be sharing statewide, countywide, and district-wide data with you on suspensions of Black students. Historically, Black students have been suspended at higher rates when compared to the district average. In the 2018-19 school year, 9.3% of African American males and 4.1% of African American females were suspended. These numbers don't seem high, but when compared to their white counterparts who were suspended at 3.2% for males and 0.9% for females, they are egregious. Black males are suspended at a rate of 3 times higher than white males. When we looked at expulsions, San Diego Unified and Grossmont Unified were the 2 worst districts for Black students. San Diego Unified has 8 times more students and expelled 19 students in the 18-19 school year, while Grossmont Unified expelled 16 Black students, only 3 students less than a district that is 8 times their size. For Sweetwater Union High School District, the top school suspending Black boys in Sweetwater District is Sweetwater District Granger Junior High. Suspended Black boys are at a rate that is 11.8 times higher than the district average at 58.3. Next is Hilltop High at 41.7%, Chula Vista High at 27.3%, and Montgomery High at 21.7%. I think we should note that Montgomery Middle, San Ysidro High, Rancho Del Rey Middle are on the list of the top schools that suspend both Black boys and girls. Quote from Mohammed, these numbers are scary given the fact that these are the same schools suspending Black students. At this point, schools are denying services for Black students. Access isn't the problem anymore. Black youth are denied the education they deserve. A recommendation would be for schools need to support and hire more Black educators. There are equity gaps that need to be addressed when it comes to Black students and faculty in San Diego County. Dr. Bull from San Diego City College said it the best. We must also acknowledge the problematic equity gap that exists in our faculty hiring practices and the suffocating knees on the necks of our Black faculty. The next comments are from Barry Smith. My name is Barry Smith, and I am a 2019 graduate of Olympian High School. It was during my sophomore year at Olympian High School that I experienced my first ever African American teacher. His name was Mr. Davis, and he taught world history. Unlike many of my other teachers, Mr. Davis didn't allow microaggressions towards African Americans, usually in the form of jokes, comments, and the use of the N-word. Having Mr. Davis as my teacher gave me intangible support. His attitude was, when you win, we win. Many African Americans felt this same support by the mostly African American track and field staff. My concern is that for the many other African American students who didn't have Black staff, they could go to like Mr. Davis as a teacher or a Black coach. The impact and importance of African American students having staff with whom they can identify and receive support cannot be understated. The use of the N-word along with other microaggressions towards African Americans must be condemned by not only African American staff, but all adults on campus. To not address these issues makes African American students feel unsafe and disconnected from the school they attend. The next comments are from Josiah Smith. Hello, my name is Josiah Smith, and I am about to start my senior year at Olympian High School. I decided to speak on these issues because I am affected by them and would rather work towards improving them than to sit back and complain. I believe an essential step in creating a lasting solution is to reform the curriculum in our classes. Disciplining kids using racial slurs may be a necessary action, but to make a lasting change and an understanding of why it was wrong can only be reached with a solid foundation of knowledge. Once students realize that African Americans were not only slaves and do more than make music and play sports, we will see fewer race-related incidents. Black students have a lack of emotional support from people who understand what they are going through. This made me think about breaking down barriers, which takes place at Olympian. It serves as a mental health check-in where students in all grade levels can talk about their experiences. Having a recurring event such as this would provide greater emotional support to African American students. There are other effective support programs for African American students out there that could be used. These programs would provide needed emotional support to African American students who find themselves minorities among minorities. The next comments are from Brandon Williams. Dear Superintendent Aguirre and board members, my name is Brandon Williams and I am a counselor and program coordinator at the UMOJA Learning Community at Southwestern College. UMOJA, a Kiswahili word meaning unity, is committed to enhancing the cultural and educational experience and increasing the persistence and retention of African American Black students. This learning community is a guided pathway, which is an institutional and statewide approach to student success. This program is an intentionally designed educational program to support our African American Black students at Southwestern College. Students that join the program are primarily from the Sweetwater Union High School District, and some students expressed that they never had an African American Black counselor and/or teacher. The UMOJA program at Southwestern College has African American Black faculty teaching the curriculum, which is the first time some students feel affirmed and validated within the education system due to having someone they can identify with. As a result, students have a strong sense of belonging, which positively impacts their educational experience. Here are some student testimonies from the Fall 19, Spring 20 cohort of the UMOJA learning community at Southwestern College. Quote, being in this program has been the best decision I have made this school year. UMOJA has given me a family outside of home. With all the support and motivation from my peers and my professors, I have been able to grow as an individual and do things I didn't think I could do. My favorite thing about this whole experience is the fact that we all came out here being closer than we ever imagined. If we could do this all over again, I would. That was from Rudy Getty, graduate of Hilltop High School. Quote, my overall experience at Eastlake High School was okay, but could have been better if I felt more welcomed and included. I love my experience at Southwestern College because I was part of UMOJA my first year. It not only allowed me to make connections with professors I aspired to be like, but I continued to receive encouragement from everywhere. Southwestern also gave me a better experience when it came to feel more included in the whole school experience. That was from Rihanna Richardson, graduate of Eastlake High. As you can see, being intentional and deliberate about the educational experience of African American Black students can help them feel a sense of belonging, which impacts their academic success. I firmly believe in the intentionality of hiring African American Black personnel and the implementation of programs as a component of promoting academic success for our African American Black students. The next comments are from Kevin Smith. Good evening, board. Thank you for the opportunity to share observations and suggestions that will ensure that all students will feel attached to their respective school, be treated equitably, and achieve academically. In 1990, I made one of the biggest decisions in my life. I decided to become an educator. I recall driving to the mountains alone to weigh the major decision I made. I joined Sweetwater in 1998. Since then, I have accumulated cherished memories of time spent with staff and students. My cultural competency has grown exponentially due to exposure and education. I took it personally when a member of the White House characterized Mexicans as rapists, bringing crime and drugs to the U.S. He obviously didn't know my coworkers or the students in my alphabet. To my chagrin, for most of the last 22 years, I've been the only African American male counselor Sweetwater students have experienced. I strongly believe that the absence of African American educators is a disservice to students and staff and endangers African American lives. Destructive and/or powerful imaging of African Americans has been ongoing since our forced arrival to the U.S. in 1619. Purposeful stereotyping of African people has justified the destruction of our bodies, as we've seen in the news. The power of these messages not only affects how others see us, but in many cases, how we see ourselves. No amount of education can protect us from the sharp arrows of discrimination. While waiting for my sons to come out of the movie theater at the Otay Ranch Mall, a familiar white Toyota Tundra parked directly in front of me. The man got out of his truck and noticed me sitting in my car. I had a hat on, so he didn't recognize me. I looked up at him and immediately recognized who he was. He walked away and returned within seconds to look inside his vehicle and to do what so many others do when they see me. He pressed his alarm multiple times. The most painful part was that he was my former neighbor who invited me into his home. In the same mall, my two sons were asked by law enforcement what they were up to. If Black lives truly matter, we as a district must commit to reshaping how we see and treat African American students and people. Let us avoid what columnist Jameel Hill calls oppression Olympics. All people of color have experienced oppression, but the marginalization and dehumanization of people of African descent is incomparable. We must adopt curriculum that gives an honest account of African American struggle and success. Campuses must model an appreciation for all cultural expressions represented at their school. Although I have always attempted to provide support to African American students via school assemblies, videos, being available, and talks with admin, they were ineffective. Efforts that do not yield systemic change will only produce temporary results. Let us work together to create systemic change on behalf of our students. The next comments are from Daria Stone. Back in 1935, W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, quote, "Race prejudice in the United States today is such that most Negroes cannot receive a proper education," end quote. When you reflect on current events concerning anti-Black racism in our country and review the data heard tonight, it is hard to argue that we have been successful in providing opportunities for a proper education for our Black students. This has been researched, battled, and fought for on many fronts for many years now, and yet here we stand with the facts we cannot deny or ignore. Furthermore, I argue that as current events demonstrate, by not providing for equity in the education of our Black students, we have neglected to properly educate all of our students. In 1933, Carter G. Woodson expanded in detail on this topic in The Miseducation of the Negro. Woodson argued that, quote, "The mere imparting of information is not education. Above all things, the effort must result in making a man think and do for himself," end quote. In 1969, Charles Wesley and Thelma Perry wrote as an introduction to this exemplary text that, quote, "Woodson sought for meaningful qualitative training, yet most education institutions held fast to their rigid, inflexible programs, under which most of the required subject matter might prove useful as intellectual discipline, but not to the life interests of the hapless captive students," end quote. As we embark on the 2021 school year, we as a district need to prioritize addressing anti-Black racism through our curriculum and instruction. In approaching this multicultural curriculum reform, we must begin with a very basic additive approach of including a fundamental requirement of an ethnic studies course and at least one course in Africana history and culture. We must not stop there, though, as it would fail to provide students with an understanding of how the dominant culture and the ethnic culture are interconnected and interrelated. We must also make it a priority to pursue the next levels of educating our students in a transformative approach and finally culminating with a social action approach. These approaches will require substantial curriculum revision, in-service training, and the identification and development of materials written from the perspectives of various racial and cultural groups, as well as an intentional focus on problems and issues considered controversial by some members of the school staff and members of the community. With these approaches, however, the reward would be great in producing students who are able to take meaningful actions and contribute to the resolutions of societal issues and problems. We will produce students who can think and do for themselves. Isn't that our goal? The late Dr. King reflected, "When we look at modern man, we have to face the fact that modern man suffers from a kind of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast with a scientific and technological abundance. We've learned to fly the air as birds. We've learned to swim the seas as fishes, yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters." The next comments are from Vicki Knox. "My name is Vicki Knox, and I am a Mar Vista alum and science educator who worked at Montgomery High. I'm also a member of Black Minds Matter, a volunteer group of teachers, counselors, parents, administrators, and community members looking at ways to address systemic racism and anti-Blackness at Sweetwater. As you have heard and will hear from statements read today and from the SEA's commitment to Black Lives Matter, now is the time for the district to enact specific systemic innovations for the benefit of our Black students, whose equitable place at the table is for the benefit of us all. The focus of my statement will be on grading equity and the need for a permanent advocacy group within the district that will study racial disparities and make recommendations to the district to hold us to our highest. District D and F grade data from the 1920 school year in core classes across ethnicity vary widely between groups. While digging through the data on my alma mater, Mar Vista High, I was taken aback to find that the D and F rates in math for Black students last year stood at 50%, while those for Hispanic and white students stood at 34.4% and 24% respectively. Comparing this to Mar Vista Academy, the disparity did not begin in high school, but did grow there. This is not to call out the Mar Vista specifically. When looking at data from other schools, one will note disparities in grade distribution across the district. Yesterday, at a community meeting, I heard Brandon Williams, a counselor and the UMOJA coordinator at Southwestern College, speak about Black student success at the community college. One of the major barriers is math success in high school. But how do we get to a future in which students of all backgrounds are successful in core subjects and in college, career, and beyond? It starts with a permanent advocacy group at the district level charged with studying these disparities, collaborating with educational practitioners at all levels, and making evidence-based recommendations to the board for adoption. A Black caucus, as suggested by the SEA, or a community advisory council, such as what our group Black Minds Matter has been discussing, can do just this. One place this group might start is by collaborating with San Diego Unified. Their board just committed to reforming district-wide grading policies to allow students to correct work and improve grades. This is a great first step in allowing any kid who may go into a math class expecting failure or experiencing hardship outside of school to be given a greater opportunity for self-growth and personal success. In my own science classes, my students have had the opportunity to correct work and reach mastery throughout the year. Students who in the past have felt they couldn't be successful in science have told me time and again that they have turned a page, and many have wanted to know how to sign up for AP Biology. The next comments are from Cordis Smith. Dear Board of Trustees and the students of Sweetwater, thank you for your service and commitments to the students in our district. As a trustee, you have been entrusted with the futures of thousands of young people during your tenure. As your mission statement attests, your leadership will lead to a safe, inclusive, collaborative culture that empowers each student to actively engage in a meaningful educational experience to pursue personal and academic success. Further, your belief statements display your disposition toward achieving the economic and societal empowerment of all 21st century leaders of tomorrow. As an African American community, we call on you to listen to the voices and experiences of people negatively affected by racism, low expectations, invisibility, and the criminalization of African Americans in our district. African Americans feel invisible. In a sea of diverse faces in our district, African Americans feel their existence is not valid. They feel they need to shrink down to be less African American. African Americans feel invisible in class and around campus when they are subjected to constant microaggressions and are required to refute stereotypes teachers and leaders are unequipped to address. One example of this is the reluctance of students to join BSUs on many campuses. Bilingual educators teaching emerging bilinguals elevate the Spanish language to develop proficient Spanish speakers. Emerging bilingual Spanish and monolingual English speakers can struggle to feel comfortable speaking the Spanish language orally or outside of a comfortable setting such as the home. Elevating the Spanish language combats the societal devaluing of the Spanish language. We must act to implement ideas that elevate and value Black culture. If we believe in diversity and a sharing of power, we must fight to include all. Black lives are damaged by racism at every economic level, and supports must be available to all Black students. While it is true that low-income Blacks suffer far from more oppressive actions or inactions, the effects of racism are not impeded by income. The trauma of decades and centuries of racism toward Blacks show up in students being called the N-word on campus, a lack of connection to a school curriculum which makes condescending mention of their culture and contributions. We also see this trauma in the low attendance rate of AA students, of African American students, chronic health issues, and lack of access to higher learning opportunities. These health issues have roots in the red line neighborhoods, which segregated, crowded, and denied Blacks of resources and equitable services. Today, we ask you to act to support Black lives by require all law enforcement agencies to adopt 8 can't wait as a condition of their contracts, hire and retain more Black teachers and administrators, provide funding to support Black scholarships, STEM opportunities, and Black student conferences, and create an ad hoc committee on elevating Black lives, have African American Studies professional input on African Studies class. The next comments are from Katrina Hamilton. As educators, parents, and community members who are against anti-Black racism, we strongly believe that it is time to eradicate institutional racism that exists in our schools here in South County once and for all. While we understand that our educational system was built on policies and ideas that promote inequities between racial groups, we are equally aware that anti-Black racism is at the root of the problem. With the recent deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Elijah McClain, and countless others, our coalition seeks to challenge the idea that there is a one-size-fits-all approach to ending years of targeting Black students, Black families, and Black faculty and staff in schools throughout the United States, including our Sweetwater Union High School District. It is time to recognize the damage it has had on African American students, which is incomparable to any other group. We vow to employ research-based strategies to correct any and all discrepancies found in key indicators that continue to inhibit progress for people of African descent in our district, city, and county. As educators, parents, and community members who are against anti-Black racism, we strongly agree that powerfully destructive imaging of African Americans since their arrival to this continent has influenced how teachers and students see them, and therefore seek to implement African studies courses for all students in the form of ethnic studies. Furthermore, as educators, we will assist in dismantling these harmful practices with continual education for staff and students on the challenges, accomplishments, and aspirations of African American people. Lastly, while we understand that all our children will return with trauma experienced from COVID-19, we are deeply concerned with how we will support our African American children who have experienced racial trauma on top of the global pandemic of this virus. We will focus on actions that develop opportunities, spaces, and support for students and staff to confront and dismantle ongoing racist policies in our community that include: 1, analyzing data that historically has targeted Black students and disproportionately high suspension, expulsion, and arrest rates on a federal, state, and local district level. 2, encouraging the active recruiting and hiring of counselors and therapists who are equipped to help Black students heal from racial trauma. 3, encouraging ongoing professional development from experts outside of the district who are experienced in eradicating racism and moving forward to bring about overall systemic change, including the use of the N-word and microaggressions against Black students, staff, and families. 4, encouraging the establishment and implementation of Black student unions in all schools and creating safe spaces for student empowerment and student voice. 5, partnering with community organizations and universities that promote anti-Black racism awareness. 6, encouraging Sweetwater to revisit its hiring practices to ensure that more Black teachers, counselors, administrators, and support staff that are reflective of our Black students. 7, encouraging the implementation of culturally responsive and empowering curriculum and teaching practices, beginning with African Studies courses for all South County High School students. 8, encouraging the revision of the district's current reporting system for harassment and aggression to one that is transparent to all stakeholders in its use and execution in supporting a safe, inclusive learning and working environment. 9, encouraging the development of an expectation of excellence in Black students by providing them with visible representation and access to college and career opportunities through equal access to courses, intentional representation of historically Black colleges through counselors, and developing connections, mentor opportunities with local colleges and universities. The next comments are from Julie Walker. Members of the Sweetwater School Board, Dr. Aguirre, and staff. The SCA Board of Directors met on July 21st to set priorities for the upcoming year. We discussed our concerns around the work that needs to be done to advocate for our Black students and staff. The district has drafted a resolution with the intention of achieving systemic change and measurable outcomes. Resolutions are not enough. There must be actions to support the words and ideas they represent. These actions must be implemented district-wide and yield evidence of progress for our Black students and staff. We as educators need to reflect on our own practices. We need to encourage difficult conversations about unconscious bias and how we interact with our Black students and other students of color. We need to strive for measurable outcomes, including increasing the placements of Black students in specialized and advanced placement courses. We need to examine and change practices that are harmful to Black students and result in greater numbers of suspensions and expulsions. Measurable systemic change requires the district to play a critical role in the overhaul of antiquated and biased practices. SCA leadership has begun discussions with Sweetwater Compliance Officer Dr. Vernon Moore, along with Teacher of the Year and SCA Site Representative Don Dumas, to turn our collective ideas into action. This is a positive first step. However, we want to underline the gravity of the term measurable systemic change, as it requires time, resources, and a purposeful design. To demonstrate SCA's commitment to systemic change, SCA will take responsibility and action. SCA leadership has invited members that believe in this work to lead the change and amplify student voices. To centralize our efforts, we have invited members to be site champions and allies to form a Black caucus within SCA. Furthermore, implementation of ethnic studies curriculum district-wide is overdue. SCA is willing to use association resources to train and educate members across the district. The district also needs to do its part to affect change on a systemic level. SCA is calling on Sweetwater leadership to commit district time and resources for staff training. The district's commitment to change must include funding for professional development. Any future outreach and induction efforts should have a component that seeks to actively recruit and retain Black staff reflective of Sweetwater's student population. It is our intent to involve all stakeholders as we work to remove systemic roadblocks in the education of our Black students. Thank you for your time and consideration. Julie Walker and the SEA Board. The next comments are from Kathleen Cheers. I will begin my comment tonight questioning how and why a back-to-school workshop was held without notifying the parents. The community's expectations would have placed parents at the top of your list of notifications. Please do not insult us with, next time we will be sure to. Parents have been anxiously but patiently awaiting news, yet you ignored their important role as if they do not matter. Trustee Segura, you have been on this board for 5 years. As board president, you didn't think to ask? Then there is the issue of the presentation. Trustee Segura asked for introductions, and one name, one voice was clearly absent, that of Dr. Fulcher. It appears district leadership chose to publicly ignore Dr. Fulcher's important leadership role in the education of our special ed students, our homeless and foster youth, adult ed students, our minority students, including Black. Is it because he is not part of the group included in the secret L Street meetings and could not be trusted to publicly ignored us? One example, the selection of Crow based on price and lack of scope we questioned. What happened when the deficit was disclosed? Crow submitted an increase stating a more in-depth scope was needed. Also, why didn't you take ownership for the unaffordable raises you gave against the advice of the previous FICMAT audit? Statewide, school board trustees continue to question how an audit subcommittee with an education senior budget analyst can claim ignorance, especially when the chair is that senior budget analyst, one committee member, a superintendent, and previous boss of the chair, and the other a fraud auditor. Where was that failure admitted to in your response to the county? Another issue in need of addressing is the perceived role a couple of our trustees, Segura Hall, played in pushing for the illegal bond known as Prop DD. What steps is the district taking to ensure in the future our community will not fall victim to a bond being passed in a deficit? Which begs the question, why didn't you trustees listen when we questioned the true state of the budget, the real financial impact, and the choice of the advisors before you voted for it? Mr. Segura, many in the community were taken aback when you cut Trustee Tarantino's questions off, important questions relative to our valuable counselors. We know you prefer short meetings, but please don't do that again. All of the valuable teachers let go. Why not months ago versus now did the teachers union agree to furlough days? It was all part of the coup, and the RIF teachers, counselors were simply collateral damage. And so once again, another public comment, another reminder of if only you would have listened to community members and bond oversight for the past 5 long years, our students, teachers, staff, and the community would not be in this mess. Another exposure of your incompetence to serve. In closing, allow me to share. What is done at L Street, I mean in the dark, always comes to light, followed by karma. What is a man if he lacks integrity? The next comments are from Katina Rondow. To all board members, a lot of work was put in by alt ed teachers and our director, Joe Fulcher, regarding alt ed programs and how to improve alt ed. Although not always an easy task, the work done by the group was truly collaborative and consensus was achieved when addressing areas that we needed to work on. I wanted to bring this to your attention because many adjustments have been made that did not include all of us stakeholders. Many of us teachers feel alt ed is like our home, our house, and we've put in a great deal of sweet equity into the alt ed home. Those of us in alt ed would really just appreciate the courtesy of having a voice at the table. So many folks have no clue what we actually do in the trenches. I get it. Not even our bargaining team, union folks, were aware how different from the main campus we really are. You only really know the program if you've worked inside the home of alt ed. Some of the most recent decisions by this board seem to have been made without consultation, input, or collaboration with the stakeholders. Yet isn't this always the mission of our district, to include all stakeholders? We look forward to increased opportunities to share our thoughts with pertinent district leaders in the area of alt ed. On another note, there is so much speculation that our interim superintendent is presumably the next permanent Sweetwater superintendent. Is this really true? I asked myself, what if 50% of the board is in favor and 50% of the board members did not favor our interim as the next permanent superintendent? The deciding vote would probably be the one board member that needs to abstain because the interim superintendent is his son's godfather. But even then, an abstention vote is technically a yes vote. Personally, I've got nothing against Solis or Getty. I have a problem with there being family relations between a board member and his superintendent. Please don't let us be that district that allows this blunt display of nepotism. The next comments are from Kimberly Dixon. Dear board members, as parents of Sweetwater District students, we are concerned about the obstacles that our district may face in reopening sports for our students. The district has not communicated their intent for sports to return, while we are witnessing other districts begin the planning process, including some preseason activities. We are concerned that our students may be left out of sports. We realize the positive impact of athletics on our children and our community and want to ensure it is still available and equitable. We understand that athletics are an important part of the high school experience and are looking for reassurance that this will be available for our students here in the South Bay. According to the recent announcement from CIF, individual schools and districts have the ability to opt out and make the decision not to participate. We are in need of reassurance that this will not happen in our district in the midst of the budget crisis worsened by COVID-19. As parents, we ask that you please consider the importance of athletics and its contribution to the social aspects of school and development. We have not received any communication from the district regarding its plans to resuming athletics. We are hearing our concerns echoed in our local community, with many families looking at transitioning to other schools or districts that are working proactively to meet the academic and athletic needs of their students. Could you please address this at the board meeting? We appreciate your time and contribution to the South Bay students. The next comments are from Matt Dixon. Dear board members, we are concerned about the uncertainty of the counselors at Mar Vista High. In the midst of COVID, our students need the counselors on campus to assist with the many psychosocial stressors. In addition, the counselors are more necessary than ever to help navigate the complex world of life planning, college, trade school, graduation. The Mar Vista counselors have played a leading role in our own children's lives while helping direct their educational activities. We recognize the importance and appreciate the hard work of the counseling staff at Mar Vista. Our community is concerned that we will not have the same counseling staff numbers as we had prior, and are afraid our students will suffer. Cutting counselors is an ominous sign for our school and reflects the uncertainty of the district. This concern is echoed in our community. We ask that you invest in our counselors at Mar Vista as they invest in our students. We don't want our counselors to become victims of budget cuts. The counselors are the heart of the school. We ask for reassurance that our students will continue to have our counselors on site and available at Mar Vista High School. The next comments are from Maddie Adato. You would think after 11 plus years, I would not have to bring the same things to the attention of the board and staff. I received about 10 phone calls this weekend asking me if I knew when the kids are going back to school and what the start date was because parents have not been notified. The only correspondence they have received was the device pickup date. There have been no emails or even robocalls sent to parents with instructions on what is going to happen to their child's education. This is new territory for everyone. You would think that there should be an abundance of information sent to parents through email, USPS, heck, even carrier pigeons if necessary. Are you purposely trying to fail the opening to online classes? Because it sure seems that way. We posted it on our website or local publications is not enough. Why aren't you communicating directly with the parents? Now on to the reopening plan that was presented, another meeting that parents were not notified directly about. It was noticeably apparent that Dr. Fulcher's department was not anywhere in this plan. There was no reference to special ed, adult ed, alternative ed, etc. Why is Dr. Fulcher being sidelined? Does this have something to do with the chastising he received by Ms. Hall with no reason? Does it have to do with those secret meetings? Yes, we know about them. Or just the fact that Ms. Carbuccia does not like Dr. Fulcher and is trying to get rid of him? Everyone knows she is the one that's pulling all of the strings at the district, and she inserts herself in everything. Trustees, you need to rein in your general counsel because she is going to cause you a lot more harm than good. She is involved in everything in this district, and your staff is starting to resent her sticking her nose in where it doesn't belong. She is general counsel acting as if she were superintendent. You as trustees need to reel her in, or was this part of the plan all along? My final thought is about the negotiations with the unions. Why was it when Dr. Janney suggested that furlough days be taken instead of pink slips, the union said no way, and now they did an about face and agreed to furlough days and pink slips are being rescinded. Oh, wait a moment. Isn't the General Counsel the labor negotiator as well? Was this part of the same plan all along? Sure seems suspicious, doesn't it? I hope everyone realizes that people are not as stupid as you may think. We can see way beyond what is being presented to the public. The next comments are from Michelle Beal. Good evening, members of the board and Superintendent Getty and Carbuccia. At Thursday's board meeting, you heard from a number of counselors who were all greatly concerned for their students and the opening of school. After listening to the communication about the seriousness of this issue, only one board member, Frank Tarantino, asked questions or seemed concerned. Let me take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to Frank Tarantino. It is refreshing to know that one board member not only understands the process for opening school, but seems to care. On Thursday, I asked for clarification on who is currently running the district, Dr. Aguirre or Jenny Carbuccia. I'm now seeking further clarification as to the exact role Jennifer Carbuccia plays in this district. To date, I have seen her acting as superintendent, legal counsel, human resources director, labor attorney, and fiscal oversight. I understand that Ms. Carbuccia is being allowed to act in all of these roles because she has the full support and consent of Ms. Hall and Mr. Segura. But if she's doing all of these jobs, and quite poorly I might add, why are we employing the others? During the board meeting on Thursday, Mr. Tarantino requested additional information regarding counselor staffing. SCGA provided each of you with the requested documentation to include projected allocations, August 3rd projected enrollment, vacancy list, and negotiated agreements. The documentation provided to you was what SCGA was sent directly from the district office. As you can see, contrary to Ms. Carbuccia's claim, there is not declining enrollment. Additionally, Mr. Tarantino asked, how did this go to hell in a handbasket? Allow me to explain. On June 25th, SCGA and Sweetwater signed impacts and effects, clearly outlining contract language to recall ripped counselors to vacant positions. On June 30th and July 15th, the district identified close to 30 vacancies. July 20th, excess counselors were placed and over 17 vacancies still existed. Rather than follow contract language and bring back 17 counselors to permanent positions, Jenny Carbuccia informed SCGA that she would only recall 7 counselors to permanent positions and recall the remaining needed counselors on 30-day contracts. SCGA identified her failure to adhere to contract language and stated they would file a grievance. Ms. Carbuccia's response was, quote, if you file a grievance, I will put a halt to recalling any counselors, and by the time your grievance works its way through, I will have my 10-day numbers from opening schools and will just recall the counselors then, end quote. So in a sense, what that translates to is, quote, I want the enrollment numbers when I want them and how I want them, and I will get them at the expense of the students, end quote. Despite Ms. Carbuccia's vile threat to hold up the process for recalling counselors, SCGA did in fact file a grievance on Thursday, July 23rd, and the district continued to call counselors for temporary contracts on Friday, July 24th. Let me be very clear so that everyone understands. SCGA will not be intimidated by Jennifer Carbuccia. Let me repeat, SCGA will not be intimidated by Jennifer Carbuccia. SCGA will not allow the district to revert back to the Gondara era of backdoor, underhanded deals. SCGA will continue to advocate for students, families, and SCGA members. Lastly, since we seem to have gone back to Gondara times, I would like to go on the public record as stating any retaliation toward any SCGA member choosing to exercise their right to voice their concerns during public communication will not be tolerated. There are no further public comments.
Thank you. So clerk of the board, will you please read the items being pulled from the consent agenda?
Yes. First, I have a couple changes that need to be read into the record. There is a correction to the backup on board agenda item G2 for the MOU with South Bay Community Services for the ACES program. Under the scope of services, the date should say 2020 to 2021. And on Exhibit A, paragraphs 2 and 3, the dates should say August 1st, 2020. There was some references to last year, which were typos. They were incorrect. The revised backup will be added after board approval. There is also a correction to board agenda items L1 and L2. The superintendent's recommendation on both these items should have the dates as June 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2020. The backup reports reflect the correct dates. It's just the superintendent's recommendation that was incorrect. These items will also be corrected after board approval. The following items have been pulled from the consent agenda. Item F3 by staff, item F6 by staff, item F8 by Mr. Tarantino and the public, item F12 by Mr. Tarantino, item F13 by the public, item G6 by staff and the public, item G7 by Mr. Tarantino, item G9 by Mr. Tarantino and Mrs. Hall, item L3 by Mr. Tarantino and the public, item Q1 by Mr. Tarantino, and item R1 by staff.
Could you do it again before F13? I'm sorry, I missed a few, I think.
Before F13?
Before it, yeah, starting from the beginning, I'm sorry.
Yeah, F3 was pulled by staff, F6 was pulled by staff, F8 was pulled by Mr. Tarantino and the public, and F12 was pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Okay, I wanted to add G2.
Okay.
H2 and O3.
G2, H2, and O3. Okay.
Yeah, G2, H2, and O3.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make the motion.
I'll second.
Move in second. Let's go to the vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, first on the list is F3.
Actually, we wanted to do
R1.
R1 first, yes, because we have Ms. Barbara Hale Carter to do a presentation, and I believe Dr. Salkeld is going to begin.
That's correct.
Thank you, Jan. Good evening, Vice President Segura, Board Trustee, Superintendent Agita, Cabinet, and Public. I'd like to introduce Special Tax Counsel Barbara Hale Carter, who's with the Special District Finance and Administration. This evening, under the agenda item R1, she's going to be sharing a presentation on the methodology related to the special tax levy that we do on an annual basis associated with our community facility districts. And she will also share how that's in relation to the resolution that is included on the agenda item number 4684. I'm going to so that Barbara can start the presentation.
Good evening, trustees, acting superintendent, staff, community members. My name is Barbara Hale Carter. I'm hoping everyone can hear me.
Yes, you're good. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just introduced as Special Tax Counsel.
Oh, sorry.
That's kind of a wonderful word, but I'm just a special tax administrator. I'm not a legal counsel. I just wanted to be very clear.
Sorry
I'm a
about
consultant. That's okay. I almost got myself a raise there for a second. I'm a consultant to the district, assisting staff with the administration of the community facilities districts. Tonight's presentation will provide a brief overview and development status update of the CFDs, concentrating on the methodology and calculations of setting the annual special tax rates and ending with staff recommendations. After each slide, I will pause to allow for any immediate questions from the board if needed. And of course, any questions or comments can be directed at the end of the slides presentation. Moving to slide 2, provides an overview of the calculations that happen on a year-round basis. From June to August, it's a busy time for the team. Not only is it at the end of the fiscal year, but it's also the development cutoff date for determining which parcels will be levied for the coming year. It's the determination of the outstanding obligation per CFD, both for new construction and modernization. This is presented to the board, which is this evening. It requires the adoption of a resolution to allow the levy of the special taxes onto the County of San Diego tax bills. And finally, there's a submittal of the levy to the County Auditor Controller's Office on or before August 10th. Our next slide, slide 3, overviews the calculation of the initial special tax rates. The chart detailed on this slide shows, and I am on slide 3. Thank you. The chart details 2 important facts. First, in the title of the chart, it's showing us that to fully fund the impact from one average dwelling unit today, the school district would need to receive approximately $46,000 for facilities. Applying this need onto a special tax within a CFD, the chart shows us the 2 options of allowing an annual adjustment of 2%, what the initial tax rate would need to be, and the average tax rate over the life of the term, or if there were no adjustments made, what the initial tax rate would need to be for every year. At the time of formation, each of the district's CFDs was established with an annual adjustment. This means that the initial special taxes were established at the lowest possible rate. Also noted in the 3rd bullet is that none of the CFDs were able to be formed to fully fund their impact at the time of formation. Slide 4 I'm hoping we move to slide 4.
Yes, you're good.
Okay, sorry, it must be on my end. I apologize. Is a preliminary snapshot of dwelling units to be levied for fiscal year 2021, highlighting the changes from fiscal year 1920. It shows that 631 dwelling units ended the term of the tax, which means that they have paid for all of the years that they were obligated. It shows that no dwelling units prepaid their tax in fiscal year 1920, which is an option to any homeowner, and that there were new dwelling units accounting for 345 additional units, and you can see by CFD where those new dwelling units were issued a building permit. These numbers here and throughout the presentation are preliminary as we finalize our review of building permit data from the cities and county. Each year, the CFD administrative team works together to update the obligation of each CFD and to determine the special tax requirement for the coming fiscal year. There are 3 basic steps. The first is to evaluate the new construction obligation. This is done in students generated and compared to seats funded through the payment of debt service and directly from special taxes. This direct payment is called pay-go, as fund balances may be used directly to fund new construction requirements. The second is to evaluate the obligation to fund capital projects that extend the useful life or modernization. This is again done by the determination of students generated and modernization projects funded. This obligation to date has only been funded with pay-go. And finally, an evaluation is done for each CFD as to the application of the current fund balances and determination of the requirement of special taxes for the coming fiscal year. The following slides walk through these steps with an example and a summary showing the status of each CFD. Let's move to slide 6. This year, I try to change CFDs each year. This year, I included an example of CFD 11 to illustrate the evaluation of the new construction obligation as to impact. You can see in the slide that CFD 11 it is built out, and it contains 1,181 detached homes, 599 attached homes, and 440 apartment homes. The next rows show us the number of students per home using a student generation rate. Applying the generation rates for both middle and high to each of the dwelling unit types, it can be shown that we are projecting a total of 222 middle school students, which means we need 220 middle school seats, and 465 high school students, hence 456, excuse me if I switch that, 456 high school seats. Moving to slide 7, this shows an example of the funding of seats used using Otay Ranch High School for illustration. This slide shows that with debt proceeds and interest earned on construction funds during the period of construction, there was a cost of $35 million. Pay-go has been expended of $2 million. The total facility cost for new construction at this high school is a little over $37 million. The percentages show how much of that has been paid. 62% has been paid, 37% is still outstanding as far as debt to be repaid, and this equates to the number of seats that are funded. Slide 8 is a summary of all the CFDs and the status of both impact per CFD and funding of the new construction obligation. The first 2 rows show the projected students, and you can identify, if you look down at CFD number 11, the numbers I read out of 222 middle school, 456 high school. Moving on, you can see the projected funded seats. These seats are projected because I use the projected revenue that will come from the proposed levy for 2021 to show that even after we levy for 2021, there is still a remaining obligation. The final column turns the unfunded seats into an unfunding dollar amount for an unfunded seat obligation per CFD. Moving on, similar to the evaluation of the new construction obligation, the next few slides walk us through the evaluation of the obligation to fund modernization. Slide 9 has been updated to show the cost for modernization to 2020. The costs reflect only the non-reoccurring costs of school construction, and in following with state standards, limits those costs to 50%. The final row provides the modernization cost per student. On slide 10, I again use CFD 11 as an example. Using the same calculation method for students projected to be generated as shown in slide 6, the cost per school type per student for 2020 and projected to be funded, and from slide 9 is multiplied to provide the total obligation for modernization. The obligation as shown in the final rows has been reduced by pay-go funds expended and projected to be funded to June 30, 2021. Slide 11 is the overview of the modernization obligation for all CFDs. Moving on to slide 12. This slide identifies both the modernization obligation per CFD and the pay-go expended and projected to be spent through 6/30/2021 on modernization per CFD. The final column identifies the remaining modernization obligation per CFD and shows that no CFD has funded their full modernization obligation. Again, moving on to slide 13. A critical component to our review is to evaluate these obligations with respect to the fund balances kept for each CFD. There may be a delay on my end, but I'm hoping you're looking at slide 13. Thank you. In December of 2019, the board was provided with a detailed accounting of the CFDs through June 30, 2019. This slide projects from the ending fund balance as of June 30 of 19 to the fiscal year end on June 30 of 2020, and then uses the 2021 budget to project the balance to June 30, 2021. Slide 14 provides an overview of the new construction obligation and modernization obligation to identify that each of the CFDs has an outstanding balance for obligation that remains even after the levy of the 2021 special taxes. I'm ready for slide 15. Oh, thank you. The allocation of the projected fund balance overview on slide 13 is evaluated against only the new construction obligation to verify that even with the projected fund balance as of June 30, 2021, there still remains a new construction obligation. This is done because historically the annual adjustment of the special tax has continued only until the new construction obligation is funded. This will be reviewed on the following slides. Slide 16 provides an overview of the development status and obligation. For CFDs that are built out, or you can see that the remaining term is shown in the number of years. If the CFD has not fully developed, the remaining term of the special tax is shown as unknown. The final two columns show us that even using the projected levy for the 2021 fiscal year, the budgeted projection of PAYGO funds for modernization and debt service payments that will occur in fiscal year 2021, none of the CFDs that are going to be levied have funded the new construction obligation or their obligation for modernization. You can see CFD number 2 funded the new construction obligation. That occurred in 2016 for the 2016-17 levy and for the 2017 and 18 levy. The taxes were not adjusted and the CFD is no longer being levied. All of the dwelling units have met the term of their obligation. Slide 17 provides the staff recommendations that follow with what we've historically been adjusting the tax rates to. For CFDs that have fully funded their new construction obligation, no indexing is applied. For the current year, that does not apply to any of our CFDs. For CFDs that have not fully funded their new construction obligation, staff recommends applying a 2% escalator to the current special taxes as follows. The majority of the CFDs that are listed there, they're shown at 98.04% of the maximum. and CFDs 17, 18, 19, and 20 would be taxed at 100% of the maximum. Slide 18 overviews the county requirement. To allow us to levy the taxes under the property tax bill, the board must take action by resolution, and the charges must be submitted on or before August 10th. The resolution before you tonight has two purposes. One, it establishes the maximum special tax for properties in which the first or initial fiscal year of taxation is fiscal year 2021, and for existing developed properties which were taxed in a previous year. Secondly, it establishes the actual special tax as a percentage of the maximum rate to be levied in fiscal year 2021 for each CFD. If anyone has any questions, the final slide just allows you that time if you have any questions of me.
Do we have any questions from the board? I have a question on slide number 4.
You have to have public comment first.
Oh, thank you, Trustee Hall.
There are no speakers to this item.
There you go. I didn't know that either.
Yay.
I think I understood it when you went on to other slides, but so was that 4? Yeah, page 4. So all these dwelling units, let me try to find out where I was looking at. So 345 new dwelling units, so that's a combination of homes, detached homes, attached homes, and apartments?
Yes, this slide does not break it out by type.
Okay, but that's what's there.
Yes.
That was the only question I had. And could you go back? How about, can you go back to the slide that showed what, does it show, you know, when we've raised it, you know, per CFD, you know, every year, every other year, all years? I'm not sure if we had that.
I believe that was in the agenda item.
Okay.
Correct. The agenda item notes the historical increases that date back to 2013-14. And consistently, it's been around 2%. There's been a couple of years. One year was 4%, and then a couple that were 0.
All right, thank you.
I have one question.
Mr. Pike, go ahead.
I read in the paper that the state has decided Chula Vista is not the area they want to put a state campus in. And because of that fact, does that mean that the construction is going to get slower? Therefore, we're not going to have as many new CFDs popping up because they're feeling that we don't have the population for a state school?
I'm not sure I'm the perfect person to respond to that. You have been building very quickly. CFD 20 is an example. It hasn't been formed for very long, and we're almost at build out.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'll enter. Mr. Tarantino, you are there, right? Okay. You're muted.
You're muted, yeah.
I turned off my camera because I thought that Barbara Hale Carter would be taking one of the squares, so I wanted to give her that opportunity, but I don't know, she was hidden, so. Anyway, if there's no further discussion, I will make a motion to adopt resolution number 4684, establishing the special tax levy for fiscal year 2020-2021 for Community Facilities District numbers 1, 3 to 6, 8, 9A, 9B, 10 to 18, 19, 1A, 1A-1, 19, 1A-2, and 20.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
sir. Second by Mr. Solis. Any more discussion? Call for the vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, I believe we move to F3 now, correct?
Yes. Board communication.
Board communication. Anybody want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay, Mr. Pike.
During our presentation from the citizens today, Ms. Piccone brought up a good point about the kids in the centers only having 3, and is there a possibility, have they given us any like credible ideas about keeping smaller versions of the centers at all the local schools so that we don't have to like send kids all over the place? Because I know we only have 3 open, but I know her, she does a lot of work at the learning centers, and I think I remember somebody saying that they had some ideas about it, and I was just curious, was that the idea that she was talking about, was that ever talked about? And also I'd like to know, what the reasons, if they decided just to go with the 3, why they didn't want to go with the smaller group, or is there some sort of reasoning behind that? And the second thing is that I've heard a lot of the Filipino people a couple of meetings ago speaking about the fact that they don't get very many translators when it comes to situations like this, and maybe even for registration and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if I could find out how many translators we have right now that are doing registration for the Filipino community, and maybe how many people actually call in, so that I maybe there's a justification if there's not very many. But I'd like to know those 2 things. A, how many translators we have, and B, how many people call in and have questions and have issues where they don't know how to register. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. I'll go. How's that? I just have one. Just if we can get an update. And I think I've read some emails about it, about the fall sports. There was a question about the fall sports, and I think it was that the CIF director did make an announcement, and maybe we could send that out as well if we haven't already. And then just if we could possibly, and then just what are we doing in terms of getting our communications out? Are we doing phone calls? Are we doing emails? Are we doing just what exactly are we doing? What is our communication plan for everything that we're putting out there? That's it for me.
I had that same question about communication, so thank you for asking that. And that's it for me.
I'll go next. I'd like to congratulate Principal Brian Murphy and the entire certificated and classified staff at Alta Vista Academy for they were awarded a 6-year WASC accreditation with a midterm visit, and That's kind of unheard of in this day and age. WASC is usually kind of stingy with those kinds of results. So congratulations to them, and again, nice work. The other thing that I have is that there's a student at Otay Ranch High School, Jordan Primer, who was one of 7 students who was selected to participate in the Union Tribune Community Journalism Scholars Program over the summer. And he will spend the next month being mentored by a professional journalist. And at the end of that month, his article or whatever his project is going to be will be featured in the Union Tribune. So congratulations, Jordan. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Ms. Hall? You're muted.
You're muted, Mrs. Hall.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Is this better?
A little.
How about now?
Yeah, that's
Have to
better.
lean in.
Okay.
You sound very far away.
All right, how's that? Is
That's
that better?
Better.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to give an update from the Audit and Finance Subcommittee meeting we had on the 20th. That was last Monday. We had a representation on the budget to the committee, the 2021 budget and the AB 1200 disclosures. Also, the audit updates for the 2018-19 and 2019-20 audits from Mr. Kevin Lewis of Kevin Smith of Crow LLP. He provided some information, and we'll be going back to our next meeting will be August 17th, where the committee will be presented the draft audit and a review of the 45-day budget revision for 2021. We also heard from our internal auditors about their ongoing and completed audits and about the fraud hotline update. One of the recommendations that came out of the committee that I wanted to bring to the board is the recommendation that we consider an additional position for the internal auditor department because of the workload that they have, just trying to keep up with all the things. And also as we implement certain changes in our district and the controls and the different infrastructure for ensuring we have the checks and balances, that they're able to perform audits in a timely manner on all those things. So that was a recommendation. I know that they felt that that was an important recommendation for me to bring to the board. So I thought I'd offer that. And besides that, it's been an interesting year, but a lot of things going on and a lot of concerns being shared by staff and also students and families and community members across all of us, I'm sure, are being contacted by any number of people about some of the things coming forward. So I look forward to hearing the report tonight on school reopening, and we do have concerns around that. But one of the issues I really wanted to support and ask Dr. Aguirre, I would personally like to form a work group. I already have one teacher in mind for that work group with Dr. Aguirre and possibly another board member and perhaps a couple of other staff and maybe a community member to work on an affirmative action plan for our hiring so we can create a board policy. And it's not so that we reflect exactly how our student and community is made up, because I don't think that will really serve us. I think we need to have it more representation from the groups that are really the minority groups of our district, so that our students really can experience across all levels those leadership roles and in teaching roles, counselors, those people, they will be able to have a real relationship with if we really hire in a greater number, especially with the Black African American and the Filipino, as was brought up over the past couple of board meetings. So I just would like to request that of Dr. Aguirre, if he could work with me on that. I'd really appreciate it if the board would support that. We could bring a recommendation back and then discuss it.
Thank you, Trustee
And that's
Hall.
all I have.
Thank you. Okay, that wraps up F6, so we can move to F8, correct?
No, it wrapped up F3.
That was F3. You need to go to F6 now.
I'm sorry, I lined it out
Okay.
already. F6.
So this is the item for the board to elect a new president and, if needed, a vice president.
I will make a motion to put the name of Mr. Segura as president and Mr. Solis as vice president. And that is in line with keeping in the rotation that we have established over the 5-year period.
I'll second that. I agree with that.
Thank you.
Move the second. Any more discussion around that? If not, call for the vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Now you can go to F8, Nick.
Maybe we should have made Kevin the president. You got your act in order there today, Kevin. No, I just want to say thank you to the board for voting for me as the board president. I look forward to serving. You know, we have a lot of work to do, like we seem to always do. But even more so during these times. And I look forward to leading and being out there and communicating with the community, listening to them, whether, you know, I agree with it or not. It's just part of what we do. And I look forward to that and working with Dr. Getty and the board. Thank you. Okay, let's move to F8.
Yes, I have 2 speakers to this item. The first comments are from Elizabeth Luane Singh Garcia. On behalf of the Sweetwater High Counseling Department, this statement is in regards to the school counseling vacancies yet to be filled. The report date for school counselors for the 2021 school year was July 21st, 2020. As of today, 4 workdays after, there are still 2.3 counselor positions that remain unfilled, potentially equating to 828 students whose schedules are incomplete, as well as the academic, college career, and emotional social needs not being met when school begins. The Sweetwater Union High School District is in violation of the Sweetwater Counseling and Guidance Association contract, Article 13.1. The 7 to 12 school counselor staffing ratio shall be 360:1 for the duration of the contract. You are approving the MOU between SCGA and Sweetwater today. How are you sure your district leadership is adhering to the agreements made with the labor unions? The next comments are from Veronica Sandoval. Good evening, my name is Veronica Sandoval. I am respectfully addressing the board to discuss the violation of the counseling contract towards our RIFT members. I have been fortunate to be working for Sweetwater for the past 26 years. I started working for the district upon graduating from Castle Park High. I worked as a secretary for the General Counsel Legal Services Department for a few years, briefly worked as a secretary for Superintendent Dr. Brandt, then was promoted to work for the Fiscal Services Department, where I worked under Chief Finance Officer Barry Dragon. I became a school counselor and have been happily working in my field for the past 17 years. As you can see, I am not only a product of this district, but I have been fortunate to call the district my second home and have proudly served my community. One of my sons is also currently attending one of our schools. Now that you know my background, I hope you can understand why I am deeply saddened and disappointed at the disrespect that has been shown to the counseling unit. To agree to a negotiated contract and blatantly go back on your word and a written agreement is unspeakable. I understand politics very well and know how negotiations work. However, what does that say about the people you have chosen to represent the district to negotiate with your employees' unions? What message are you as a board trying to convey? As an employee and community member, it tells me that you have a group of people who lack self-respect and whose integrity can be questioned. SCGA walked away from the negotiations table with a signed agreement. When we reached an agreement, I was elated because despite losing 3 workdays, it meant those unit members would continue to put food on the table and provide insurance for their families. Due to the COVID pandemic, we are living in unprecedented times. When we look back and reflect on how Sweetwater served students, employees, and the community during this tumultuous time, what will be said of our district? I will say that students' mental health was disregarded as a priority. Hope was taken from the employees who support students' academic, social, and emotional needs. As you already know, mental health has been on the rise the past few years, and more so now with this pandemic. The news journalists mention the increasing mental health concerns on a weekly basis. Counselors are essential to supporting students' mental health. I ask that you please speak with your district negotiations team that represents you and ask them why they have violated a contract that they had agreed to, and then do what they did without it disturbing their conscience. Our negotiated agreement of 360-1 needs to be respected, and our RIFT employees that were supposed to be called back on a permanent basis need to return so that we can support our students' academic, social, and emotional needs, especially during this time of crisis. There are no further speakers on this item. It was also pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Mr. Tarantino.
Yes. I first of all, I appreciate okay, quick.
I finally found it. Sorry.
Oh, you found it? Okay.
It was one of the participants. Not everybody was muted.
Oh, okay. All right. I really appreciate this MOU because it really clarified a lot of the information that that really was it was presented in the opening plan, but not to the extent in which it was delineated in this MOU, particularly when it comes to the learning centers and also the Launch Academy. I do have a question related to the AB 1200 form, page 4 of that AB 1200 form, under section A, the last paragraph. Under section A, it says the district and SCGA agree to keep 3 learning centers open for the 2020-2021 school year. These learning centers will be overseen by the site leadership team. Parties acknowledge that a 1.0 learning center counselor will be assigned to a 7.25 workday and may be eligible for a 1/6 should the enrollment increase. Part that I have a concern about is the next sentence. The 3 learning center counselors, for the 3 learning center counselors, the existing 2020-2021 independent study budget will be repurposed for the staffing allocations. My understanding when the independent study program was first presented was that there's already 1 counselor assigned to independent studies, and there would be 3 other counselors, 4 total, that would serve the population of the students that were in independent study. And at that time, I believe the number that was given to us with the hostile takeover by Chula Vista Elementary, our 7th and 8th graders, was about 1,600. I know now that they have backed off and they want to help a friend in need. Again, I feel that the timing is suspicious, but that's my problem, not yours. The other thing, so So my question is, okay, so if we back out the Learning Center students from independent studies, and I'm assuming that there's going to be about 150 students per Learning Center, then how many counselors, if we're using the budget for independent study to pay for the Learning Center counselors, are we just going to have one counselor in independent studies? And if we have to add counselors, how are we going to fund those? Same thing goes in F12 for the 6 Learning Center teachers, because 6 Learning Center teachers are also being paid for out of the independent study program. So in short, my question is, how are we going to pay if we have to replace counselors and teachers in the independent study program that the funding has been shifted to the Learning Centers?
Thank you, Trustee Tarantino. I'll ask our negotiator, Ms. Carbuccia, to respond.
Okay.
You're muted.
Sorry.
Thank you.
The AB 1200 really is a finance related document. So I'll speak, and then if Jenny wants to correct me, I'm happy to do that since I was called on. So as part of the discussions with our labor partners regarding reopening of the learning centers, we were looking for, and with both of those partners, we're looking for a cost neutral way to do that. And so what we did agree to was opening 3 learning centers, and that the teachers that would have previously been allocated, or at least a large portion, and the counselor so that would have been allocated, would return to the learning centers. And then if the numbers in independent studies got to a point where they exceeded the thresholds of 360 to 1, or the caseloads as set forth in practice and independent study, that additional teachers and counselors would be returned there. So because of the contractual obligations right now, to open any learning center, going to Mr. Pike's earlier question, to open any learning center, we have to have a full-time counselor. And additionally, there are allocation bases for teachers. And so we did reallocate 3 of those back, the 3 that were taken from those 3 learning centers. And so we really need to look at what the numbers come out to be, Mr. Tarantino, and if the numbers are such that they exceed what that one counselor can handle, then at that time we would have to allocate that. We don't have that enrollment yet that I know of.
Well, I'm talking about independent study. We're taking money from independent study and paying for the 3 counselors in the Learning Center. My question is, what should happen? Should we need to add, so that based on what my recollection was about independent study, there were going to be 4 total counselors in independent study to serve probably about 1,600 students. That was the initial thing. So if we need more counselors in independent study, because right now there's just 1 assigned, because there's 3, there were supposed to be 3 and 3 others, and they're not assigned. So how are we paying for those? And has the county weighed in on that? And do they have an issue with that?
Yeah, so again, Mr. Tarantino, the allocation upon closure of all of those learning centers was to allocate 3 additional counselors over to independent study to make up for what we believed the numbers may well be. In meeting with our teachers and our counselors to reach agreement, we said that we would allocate those 3 back to the learning center, and should our numbers increase in independent study such that we need to go above the 360 to 1, we would have to allocate an additional counselor or percentage of a counselor to get to that percentage above, or that number above 360 to 1. But we would need to see that students are actually enrolled there to do that. And so I think that is the piece similar to teachers. And I know F12, you're going to ask the same question. Similarly, to make sure that the opening of the learning center was cost effective, we returned, or cost neutral, we returned those teachers back to the learning centers such that they would fulfill the need to meet contractual thresholds for teaching. And then should the numbers at independent study get above whatever those numbers in practice at ratio, which are different than our contractual numbers, additional teachers would need to be allocated. Again, that would need to be based on enrollment, the enrollment which we don't have yet.
So I hear you saying that the additional ADA is going to pay for that. How are we going to pay for it? Can you answer that? How are we going to pay for those teachers and counselors if they should have to go back to independent study?
So again, right now, and it is cost neutral because it was existing employees, just like any other, if we end up having to have our enrollment grow in a certain area, we will meet those contractual thresholds, and based on enrollment, we'll add additional staff as necessary based on what an independent studies staffing plan or plan for that program would look like. Similarly, a number of students that may have gone from the learning centers may enroll in Palomar or in options or in their home school, and those numbers will be accounted for in those school settings. And when we get to day 10, we'll be looking at that enrollment evaluation to make sure the FTE ratios are correct.
Okay, so we're anticipating that there won't be any extra charge. We're hoping that they'll go other places rather than go to independent study.
I'm not the speaker for as it relates to independent study. I'm telling you what we would do with enrollment based on the contract.
Okay. All right, I'll drop it.
Any other comments, questions on F8?
You're causing feedback. There you go.
Sorry, I have that. Oh, is somebody else talking?
No, go ahead, Paula.
Okay. My question would be around part of this, the whole idea of Chula Vista Elementary and their whole thing with trying to grab enrollment is not really part of this decision, correct? And we really do need to know what our final enroll or who shows up on school day 1 and school day 10 and school day 15 before we continue to add people into our, contracted positions. That's key, because if it turns out that a lot of people don't return, then we would be really we would be going right immediately back to another dark day and come February for the following fiscal year. This at least gives us a point in time to start the conversation and to really wait for those enrollment numbers to come in. And that's unfortunate because everybody's sort of put in a holding pattern, but that's really where we're at. The other piece of this is the fact that we're doing a launch academy. And I really think that, considering the fact that we learned the other night in our board workshop that they had 700 people apply, or 700 applications for 360 positions, tells us that is going to be a really viable solution to a lot of students' needs, especially some that would have either enrolled in a learning center or an independent study program. So I think we're going to see some offsets across the board on very different things going on in our district. And we need to give staff that support as they lead us through that. That's my opinion. I know it's frustrating for everybody that wants answers right now and everything right now, but that would be really a horrible way for us to move forward as a district. So we just need to be patient for a couple of more weeks to get the numbers and really understand where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. Anybody else?
No, I think she said it very well. Very well done, Paula. That's exactly how I feel. We need to know. We don't want to spend a lot of money if we're not going to have the teachers. And if they get in there, then they're guaranteed for the whole year.
Thank you, Mr. Pike.
Yes, I would add that I concur with that. I believe, I know it's very difficult for all our educators that we work with, and it's very, when you don't have a job right now guaranteed, that it's really, it's really tough, and I totally understand that. But I think we do need to be patient and wait a couple weeks and let this roll out and see where we end up. I know that in other districts, enrollment is down in other districts as well as just not us. And I hope that I would ask that. I know in my F3, when I asked about communications, I just hope that we, if you could just let us know what the plan is for what we're doing to capture enrollment. I know my wife, who's at National School District, she was telling me their experience the same thing, and it's just kind of an overall thing in these times. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve F8.
I'll second. Mr.
Tarantino, second. Please I'll call for the vote.
Ramos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. If my chicken scratch is right, F12.
Yes. Pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Yes, I just wanted to commend both the SEA and our district bargaining teams for addressing the impact of students with IEPs in some core classes. And I'm specifically referring to Section 5 under special education, where we're going to institute a pilot at 4 schools. And see what we can do to provide extra support for teachers in the mainstream who have a large amount of students with IEPs in their classes. That's all I wanted to call attention to the fact that I'm glad that issue is being addressed. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Tarantino. Anybody else have any comments around F12? And I would echo Mr. Tarantino's comments that that's a very good point. Those are most vulnerable. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Pike.
Second.
Second by Mr. Solis. Call for the vote, please.
Adamos? Here. Hall? Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Move to G2.
No, F13.
F13. Dang it. Okay, F13.
I have comments from one member of the public.
Sure.
These are from Maddie Adato. Can we have some clarification on this item? What is the breakdown of per item cost? How many computers has the district purchased already? Who has the inventory, and has anyone seen this inventory? Can you please tell me how we are going to open on August 3rd if we don't have devices for everyone? We have been at distance learning since March, and according to staff, it was a huge success. How can we be a huge success, as previously stated, if we need 4,355 additional units for students and 650 for teachers, and we start in 2 weeks? Why isn't anyone listening? We are not ready to go back. You only get one shot at this before we start losing students to charters, homeschooling, and private school. As I said in my opening communication, it's like you want to fail. Board members, ask questions, stop being silent. Thank you. There are no further comments on this item.
Any comments by the board?
President.
Yes, go ahead, Mr.
Oh, thank you.
So you get your hand up.
Yeah, with regards to the breakdown, do we have all that? And is it all going to be ready for our lunch date?
So if I may, President Segura. So in working with Director of Information Technology, this order was put in on July 1st and to ensure that our students and our staff have sufficient devices. We are going to implement a plan where at the beginning of the school year, a portion of our 9th graders will have iPads, so they will have access to digital content. When the devices come in, information technology will put a process in place to, in essence, swap the iPads for the laptops. That is not anticipated to happen until late October because these have to be shipped from China, so there's sufficient lag in the manufacturing process. But again, given what we know now, information technology has put forth a plan so that each student has devices at the beginning of the school year. As I mentioned, some of the 9th graders may have iPads, but that there's a plan in place to ensure that they have access to learning material.
Thank you, Dr. Getty. Mr. Solis, still have your hand up, sir?
Sorry about that. Thought I lowered it. No, I'm good. Thank you for that.
Anyone else have any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for F13.
So moved.
I'll second. I'll second. Call for the vote, please.
Adamos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
G2?
Yes. Hold by you, Mr. Segura.
Yes, so my question is, so from reading this, this is for our after-school program. Just kind of was wanting to know what, if the schools are closed, what they're going to be offering after, online, or just kind of what they're going to be offering to the students to support them. And when do we do like an accounting of how many students are participating?
I'll ask Dr. Ana Maria Alvarez to respond.
Good afternoon, board member or President Tarantino. I'm sorry, President Segura, board member Tarantino.
We're like, our presidency's like a hot potato around here.
I know, I can't keep up, but congratulations. Good evening, board members and our community. So at this time, I made mention of it when we had the board workshop. Our schools initiated plans, developed plans for the spring of 2020, and some of those plans will continue into the upcoming year. The one element that we need to have included, however, is student voice. So all of our, and student leadership. So all of our programs that offer after school will be meeting with their students the first 2 weeks of the opening of school year to finalize plans for distance learning and through the after school programs. And so there will be both live interactions and then also some activities that are recorded for student use. Those plans will be provided to me, I believe, by August 14th. They will be given also a copy to the board. I'll do that in a board update. And then attendance is measured through the CitySpan system. We have to upload our attendance throughout the school year. And so we monitor how many of our students are participating, in what they're participating, what particular activities, and then that report is submitted. So we can provide those attendance reports also to the board.
Thank you very much. That was just what I was looking for. I'm glad to hear that we'll be getting the input from the students the first couple of weeks, and you answered my questions about attendance. So anybody have any other questions around that? If not, entertain a motion for G2. I'll make the motion for approval.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Pike. Call for the vote.
Ramos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
G5?
G6?
E6? G6.
Yes, do you want to take the public comments first? I believe that staff's going to give a brief update on the reopening plan.
Do we need a short break? Okay, I think we'll take a, let's take a break till, because I believe this will be long. 8:30, 10 minutes. Okay,
Alrighty.
10-minute break.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's go to G6.
Do you want to take the public comments first before the staff presentation?
Is that how we normally do it? Yes.
Usually if there's a staff presentation, it just depends what the
Yeah,
topic
let's take,
is.
we can take the public comments first.
Okay. I have 4 comments on this item. The first comments are from Elena Vallejo Paez. Members of the board, I'm speaking to you today as one of the 22 laid-off counselors, a community member, and a Sweetwater District alum. I was raised in our community, attended our schools, and have been staff in various capacities for over 10 years, so I believe I have a strong grasp on the many seasons our district has endured. Our district and community have always stood strong to overcome several obstacles in the past. Our current obstacle being mismanagement of funds and the unprecedented pandemic. Unfortunately, this is the first time that I have felt disillusioned and disappointment with how our district continues to proceed. I agree that distance learning is the safest and most logical way to begin reopening our schools, but it does not mean that we should not continue to put our students first and foremost. Currently, the district has decided to not honor the full-time employment openings available for laid-off counselors, including myself, which has left many schools without balanced master schedules and many students without a counselor as a contact. It was bad enough that due to the mismanagement of funds, I and others had to lose my students who I'd created relationships and trust with, but now they are in the dark with not enough counselors at every school, despite there being openings. Is that working in the best interest of students? Current employed counselors are working tirelessly to try and do the job of 2 or 3 and finalize a master schedule so our students can start off the school year with a full schedule and minimal interruptions, but it is virtually impossible with what the district has unfairly placed on their plate. At my previous site, Sweetwater High, we were allocated 7.3 counselors due to enrollment, but right now my team is working with only 5 counselors because the district has refused to fulfill the remaining openings with permanent staff, despite there being no change in projected enrollment. Students and parents are still wondering what classes they will have, if they will graduate, who will support and advocate for them. I am a part of many community groups, and I see parents asking these questions every day, and in their frustration with the lack of communication, have started to search for other options on where they can send their children. This will mean a loss of enrollment. Is this what putting students first looks like? Let us do our job. The district should honor its contract it has made with our association and fill those positions so that counselors can start to finalize schedules and begin creating connections with students to help them as the school year starts. Let us be a part of helping the district have a strong reopening plan that will retain students versus a messy, unfair situation for all that will ultimately result in students rightfully seeking education and guidance from other schools that truly put their students first. The next comments are from Chris Elam. Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Aguirre and board members. After listening to the presentation on Thursday, I have several serious questions that were not addressed. Please stop letting Mr. De La Casada off the hook when he answers your questions by simply talking in circles to confuse people. His response to how will we make sure that all students have a device and a hotspot was to pass it off onto cities. The state law does not say, let someone else figure it out. It holds districts accountable for guaranteeing access to a device and hotspot for every student in the district. So please ask him, when will that be done? Until that point, will those students without access to a device and hotspot be excused from all instruction, or will you be expecting teachers to provide paper options again? If so, what's the plan, given that instruction begins a week from today? 1. How have students and their families been contacted to see if they need a device? Via email again? We need to stop emailing those without technology, asking if they have technology. Same with requiring them to finish their registration via computer when they don't have a computer. 2, does the hotspot that we are providing come with unlimited data? How about the Cox Connect plan that we are pushing? If not, students cannot be expected to participate in live instruction. Expecting them to be on their computers for 6 hours a day with 2 to 3 of those hours streaming live synchronous instruction is unacceptable. Contrary to what Dr. Alvarez stated, the state law does not require live instruction. It requires live interaction. That can include messaging with students, providing feedback to them, etc. 3, we have to stop letting De La Casada be a roadblock to our students' needs. He seems to be able to say, oh, Infinite Campus can't do that, and everyone just accepts it and moves on, regardless of the harm that brings to students. The current bell schedule is unacceptable. Grossmont uses Infinite Campus and is also doing the quarter system, so that response from Dr. Alvarez is unacceptable. No adult with a fully developed frontal lobe to help with planning and organization would take on 6 online classes at once, yet that is what we are expecting of 12 to 18-year-olds. This is why Grossmont and many other districts are going with a quarter system this year. San Diego Unified is looking at a maximum of 2 subjects classes per day. We will be overwhelming students who are living in a pandemic that we all know is hitting their communities the hardest. 4, while I have many issues with this plan, my biggest concern is that once again, it was presented with no time left on the clock so that concerns from the community and teachers cannot be addressed. It's just like De La Casada presenting contracts and saying they have to be approved because they expire the next day. This needs to stop. The next comments are from Michelle Beal. This past Thursday, the district leadership team presented to the school board and superintendents a plan to reopen schools on August 3rd. I found it interesting that with less than a week away from opening schools and one school, Alta Vista Academy, already opened, that the plan had so many, it's still a work in progress, or we are still trying to finalize details listed. I certainly don't blame the district leadership team that presented for not having a finalized plan, because we all know your team is only as good as its leader and the direction your leader provides. I have some serious reservations about the model that was presented, as it does not seem to follow a true online or distance learning model that allows the flexibility for the students or the teachers. Hopefully, the schedule itself is something that is still a work in progress. As I mentioned previously, my school, Alta Vista Academy, opened on July 7th, and because the district seemed to forget that we and our students existed, we essentially had to fend for ourselves to develop a plan to reopen school in a way that met the needs of our students. For those not familiar with Alta Vista Academy, it serves some of the most at-risk students in the district. Fortunately, because we were used to being the forgotten school, our team, Principal Brian Murphy, teachers Misty Cheers, Luis Marone, Chris Rankin, Andreas Capetanekis, William Bleish, Cesar Guzman, and myself all came together to develop a distance learning program that would support the needs of our students while taking into consideration our teachers and their commitments. Kudos to the Alta Vista team for always putting students first. In creating our plan, we identified a number of questions and ran into a number of obstacles. Our principal reached out to the district for guidance, and we are still awaiting answers on many of our questions. I mention our situation because we are a small school with under 100 students, and opening this school year with no clear plan from the district was extremely stressful. If our small school struggled, I can't imagine what larger schools will be feeling come day one. To date, we still do not have clear guidance on recording attendance, providing services to students with IEPs, specifically from outside agencies, clarifications on MOUs with outside partners, and most importantly, a approved safety plan regarding COVID. It's frustrating because our school has been in session for over 2 weeks and has simply had to wait for a finalized plan from the district. It simply doesn't seem right to leave the students and staff at Alta Vista in limbo while we wait for our district leader to figure it out. Dr. Gianni might have made errors, but she would never have allowed the opening of school to fall through the cracks. But then again, she had actual experience in education and opening of schools. I hope that moving forward, whoever is leading this district pays more attention to creating a timeline that addresses all schools in the district. If the opening of Alta Vista Academy is any indication of what the other schools have to look forward to, all I can say is good luck. The next comments are from Tony Pina. Good afternoon, Superintendent and board members. My name is Tonya Pina, and I teach at Hilltop High. At the last board workshop, Mr. Segura read my comments that was submitted through Google Docs, but was not read by Mr. Rubio. My concern is the lack of language in the reopening plan under planning and sanitation practices regarding air circulation and ventilation. There is language regarding cleaning surfaces, but there is no mention about maintenance of HVAC systems that ensure proper air ventilation. There is growing evidence and awareness that the COVID-19 virus spread occurs more rapidly with aerosols that stay in the air as long as air stays in a building, and that poor ventilation systems exacerbate the spread. In order to ensure a safe and healthy learning environment, which includes emotional safety, I am requesting that one of the board members make a motion, then ask for a second, to amend the reopening plan that includes the following language. Quote, a placard shall be visible by each classroom door that certifies the air exchange rate, 6 to 12 room air changes per hour as recommended by the CDC, that also states the type of air filter that is used, the date it was last replaced, and the date the ducts were last cleaned. Quote, I have taught in the same building the last 13 years. In this building, there are no windows that can be opened. My students, colleagues, and I have experienced rooms when the AC stopped working, thermostats that stopped working, air circulation turned off during class time, teachers taking their classes outside due to unbearable conditions, foul smells, leaking onto the ceiling tiles, etc., days on end. I don't blame anyone because I know we are underfunded. I am just pointing out the conditions that we have experienced and that we have to do better during these times in order to be and feel safe. As it stands right now, I will not feel safe returning to my classroom and will not send my 2 sons back until I am assured that each of their classrooms meets or exceeds air circulation and ventilation standards. When it is safe to reopen, I invite you all to use my class to hold a board meeting. Thank you. There are no further comments.
Thank you. We go to the presentation.
So, President Segura, since we already presented this last week at the workshop, I was going to ask Dr. Alvarez to present a brief summary of the information that was shared, and then we can open it for questions and more of a question and answer period.
Sure.
Dr. Alvarez.
Thank you. Dr. Winters will be projecting the presentation for us. You just take a moment for that to go up on the screen. Thank you. So as we stated, anytime that we do any type of planning, we try to be inclusive of our stakeholders. We want to make sure that, as we iterated last week, that the opening plan was really a plan based on the input from teachers, counselors, students, parents, community members, and our staff, our principals, and our district administrators. With this, we created teams, and those teams were aligned to our LCAP goals. There were 4 major subcommittees led by the cabinet members: teaching and learning, health and safety, that was led by Dr. Fulcher and Ms. Quirk, parent and community engagement led by Manny Rubio and Ms. Carbuccia, and then coherence across our systems, which included at one point Dr. Aguirre, Tom Glover, David de la Calzada, and Dr. Salkhead. We wanted to make sure that, making this transition to a starting of the school year to distance learning, that we had voices at the table. And so you'll see a plan that does include that. We're going to go ahead and just talk about the guiding principles. And once again, remember they were based on the LCAP. We wanted to make sure that anything we did provided some sense of normalcy for students in a very unnormal situation. We would keep everything in target to ensuring that the health of our students and our community, our staff members, were at the forefront of everything that we were doing, and that we also had contingencies for moving in and out of distance learning and looking at any other type of scenario that could occur within our plan. So as was mentioned before, our distance learning plan will go from August 3rd to October 2nd. We do have some cut points that we'll share at the towards the end of the presentation. It is based on our local health indicators. Just as a reminder, on July 17th, the governor did change our orders and said that school districts at this time who were on the 14-day monitoring list could not open up in person. And so at this point, through October 2nd, we will be in a distance learning model. With the professional development, we partnered with UCSD, Department of Extended Studies, to ensure that we had effective supports for our teachers. And that was really looking at online instruction, not only the teaching components, but the assessment components, the checking for understanding, and then the delivery of the content. So our daily schedule, we did have a committee that focused solely on this. There were conversations about administering what would be similar to a quarter system. Unfortunately, because the decisions were being made towards the end of the school year, that would have created some major impact for our school sites in terms of master schedule development. Most of the master schedule development starts in February, March, and April, and at the time when the decision was being finalized was in June. And so in order to ensure that we wouldn't have to go back and risk not having a master schedule ready by the start of school, we did do a modified 6-period day. There are some sites that have different schedules. For example, Palomar has a 10-period schedule. Chula Vista High School has an 8-period schedule, as does Southwest. And so there may be variations of this, but most of the schools will follow something similar. Advisory will be optional for some schools. Primarily middle schools will be utilizing advisory and high schools will not. But each individual site will be setting their schedule and sending that information to parents. So in terms of accountability for distance learning, the Senate Bill 98 does talk about having a teacher direct connection with students. This was something that we certainly saw feedback from in the spring. At that time, we did not make synchronous instruction a requirement, but at this time we are asking that synchronous instruction does occur. And we are asking for 30 minutes per class per day. Asynchronous, which means that the teacher and the student are not face-to-face during video conferencing, will also occur. We are trying to add some flexibility for teachers, understanding that teachers are at home, they may have children, they may have other factors that affect them. So we're trying to be flexible within the time schedule. And for students, we're really making sure that, grades are a component. And so we want to make sure that they attend the daily synchronous lessons. If they're not able to, that they contact their teachers and they let them know. And that it's important that that communication be at the forefront of everything that happens within those courses. So the attendance component for distance learning is based on 2 factors. One is that we have to provide a measure for daily attendance on every day. And we also have to include what's called weekly engagement records. And so we'll continue to report absences through Infinite Campus. We will also be monitoring the chronic absenteeism reports, and then we'll be providing the updated procedures for sites when the teachers return to work on Wednesday. As I mentioned before, in the spring, students were held harmless, and so students' grades were, in one sense, stayed the same or could only improve. Under this new school year, students will have to earn their grades, and they have to be responsible for those grades based on mastery and the course requirements. We are working with our teachers to ensure that before any student earns a D or an F, that there are connections with the family and with the student to ensure that interventions are provided and that students have a opportunity to re-engage so that there aren't issues. We also acknowledge that during this time, both students, families, and our own teachers and staff may have experienced trauma, and we want to ensure that throughout this time that they are receiving supports to ensure that students can access the curriculum and instruction. Just as a reminder, the class of 2020 did have a change in the graduation plan. We are going to reinstate our Sweetwater Union High School graduation plan. And the only changes for the class of 2021 from what would have been our traditional plan is that the 30 hours of community service are no longer included because of the risk of infection. And so we want to make sure those are removed. With the resources that we have curated through the Curriculum and Instruction Department, with conjunction with our TOSAs, our Teachers on Special Assignment, and teachers that were hired to write curriculum, and our counselors, we created a website particularly for curriculum instruction. It provides standards-aligned content, instructional resources, instructional guides, where shells of courses are created and developed for teachers. Teachers can copy these shells and make their own classes. We have included units of study that provide various engaging strategies, supports for English language learners, students with disabilities are included in all of these as our AVID strategies. The counselor resource page also has resources for students, has resources for counselors, has Wellness Wednesday information, Thrively information, which is a college and career program that helps students find their interest, and also has outside resources for students. The parent resource page provides a website that provides enrichment activities, social emotional learning, online supports, and how to use all the technology that's included in our program. Then we have one page that's dedicated specifically to social emotional learning, where 10 units or 10 lessons are created to include in synchronous learning. And then also other resources are available for staff emotional well-being and student emotional well-being. One of the primary areas that we had was how do we support our diverse learners, and our diverse learners, of course, include our English learners, our students in transition, our homeless and foster youth, our low-income students, and our students with disabilities. So keeping this in mind, all the supports and resources that were created for either teachers, counselors, students, or parents all target supports and strategies to support our diverse learners. In addition, we included ways to connect with students, additional ways to offer childcare for students through our partner agencies, ensuring that multiple means of communication were provided so that students would know exactly what was available for them, and then also the training to onboard parents to not only the resources, but the technical resources so that they would know what's available at their school sites. Some of the interventions that could support our students would include small group instruction, individual instruction, tutoring, and utilizing our paraprofessionals to provide additional supports for our families. For special education students with disabilities, Dr. Fulcher and his team created 4 primary foci. Those priorities really included ensuring that the safety, the health, and the welfare of students and families was at the forefront of everything that we're doing, that the Free and Public Education Act, that we delivered the services in the best way that we could, given the circumstances. And then the third area was ensuring that documentation of the services were noted so that we could remain consistent in providing those services. And then the last one is that the Individuals with Disabilities Act certainly wasn't built for a pandemic, but that we're trying to do everything possible to make sure that our students with disabilities receive the appropriate services. One of the areas that we thought was a very important focus was providing for our counselors professional development, particular to supporting students in foster care and homeless situations and the resources available. Dr. Fulcher leads a team at the district that provides those supports, as well as mental health supports, and knowing what those referral processes are and how to get students into agency supports that are needed. The counselors will be providing supports to the students through office hours, through counseling, through instruction, and through consulting and referrals. The counseling plan will be available later this week. And then Dr. Winters is going to talk a little bit about the technology.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Feedback. We changed something.
Okay, is that better?
It is.
So thank you and good evening. So the goal with technology, which was questions raised tonight, was to have a device in the hands of every student and internet capability available for every student, as well as every staff, the goal of which we're working toward and have been working toward, using very many creative solutions. As we all know, in this pandemic, the whole world is looking for devices, literally. And so kudos to the IT department and all those who have contributed toward the effort to be prepared for August 3rd. Indeed, we will have a device in every student's hands on August 3rd. Likewise, the procedures for deploying equipment have been carefully designed to keep at the forefront the safety of staff, students, and community.
So as I mentioned earlier, we will be in distance learning from August 3rd to October 2nd. And so one of the questions that definitely, comes to mind is, what's that criteria? How do we transition from distance learning to in-person instruction? And part of that is really looking at the county monitoring list and ensuring that a local health jurisdiction has not been in that or on that list within the 14 days prior. There's also a county positivity rate that we're looking at, and that should be below 5% on that 14-day average. And then the last one is a more localized one, looking at the number of cases particular to the Sweetwater district, the Sweetwater zip codes, and that has to be decreasing over a 14-day period. At that point, decisions would be made if we were able to go back to an in-person, or when we would be able to go back to an in-person model.
Good evening, this is Janaea. To touch base on health and safety, the committee was comprised of multiple people across the district, and our focus was to put together the outlines for how students and staff would engage with the campuses once they return to the facilities. And so it's multi-layered, and you can see as you move to the second slide, we address social distancing, hygiene, PPE, screening, monitoring, cleaning and sanitization, and also determining, identifying symptoms and levels of exposure. All of this is done in compliance with state, federal, and local guidelines, to which we receive weekly updates. And as a part of the draft and the document that we have in front of us, we are continuing on a regular basis to monitor that document, see where it needs to have updates, and how it translates to the work that various departments are doing throughout the district in terms of supporting school facilities. Thank you.
And the return process you can see is laid out here in the various stages that could come into play. Currently, we're in stage 1, completely distance learning based on those health indicators that you heard Dr. Alvarez mention earlier. And we will not move to any one of these stages after stage 1 until those criteria are met. In stage 2, you can see we might have up to 10% of the students on campus, which would be based on choosing students who have the greatest need, whether that be learning loss or other needs that would warrant in-person instruction. And then moving on to stage 3 and 4, you can see we would move to either 20% or 50% of the student body at any one time on campus. The 20% would include students coming possibly 1 day a week, every student eventually coming in at least once a week. And then 50% students be able to come in twice a week at smaller class size, maintained in those environments. And then finally, stage 5, the place we would all love to get to quickly would be, given improved health conditions and community spread, we would go back to 100% face-to-face.
So as I mentioned earlier, checkpoints were established throughout the year to potentially transition from distance learning to in-person. So the first one would be September 21st. And at that point, we would determine whether we would do the rest of the school, the first semester in distance learning. The reason that we have these checkpoints is that for many of our departments, we need about a 4-week time frame to transition from distance learning to in-person, in particular for transportation because of the routes and the mapping that needs to occur. The second checkpoint would be in November 30th, to see if we start second semester in distance learning or in person. And the third one would be March 1st to determine if we do the rest of the semester, if we were in distance learning, if we would transition to in-person instruction. And so those are some key timelines, knowing that if we go into in-person instruction and infection rates increase, or there's another order, we may have to quickly move back to a distance learning model.
And one option that we've included in this year's offerings is the new Launch Academy, a completely online instructional model for Sweetwater, something that's actually been in the works for many years. It is not a response to COVID, though this situation has certainly sped up our work to get this off the ground, no pun intended. The curriculum at launch will be the Apex curriculum, which has been used previously for credit recovery. It will be used for both credit recovery and new curriculum this year, or new course requirements this year. It will be a blending of other models we have in the district. It has some elements of independent study, some elements of direct instruction in a way that's never been quite delivered before in Sweetwater. Students will have access to their homeschool athletics and some electives on campus pending space availability. As you can see, our target population there is to have up to 360 students, a number we will not have any problem reaching to start the school year.
And then, as I made mention earlier when the question was asked, our after-school programs are also finalizing their plans for the opening of school. With their leadership team, the student leadership team, they'll finalize those plans, and both distance learning and in-person models will be available for our students. And then athletics was certainly a question that was brought up. Dr. Moore has sent out several memos to families and to our community. As we know, the California Interscholastic Federation suspended its fall season for athletics. We will, instead of having 3 athletic seasons, are going to compress into 2. The first one starting in mid-December and then the second one, the spring, in mid-March. By mid-August, CIF will provide an update on their guidance, and we'll have more information. We are considering, based on the compression of 3 seasons into 2, that there will be extra time taken to ensure that facilities use is available for the teams. We know that several of our coaches, of the 1,500 coaches that we have, several of them, many of them, coached multiple sports. And so there may be some conflicts there. We also know that students also have multiple sports that they participate in, and there may be conflicts there. And then supervision. So those are considerations that we're putting out there. We want to make sure that our athletes are safe and yet are able to participate in a program that so ties our students to our community. And at this time, we're open for any questions.
Thank you. Who would like to go first? Mr. Solis.
Thank you, Mr. President. A good question was brought up with regards to those that are not able to go online. Will we have paper? Or is there any thought of that? Or
so the intent with the devices, being able to give each student a device, that is the intent, number one. Number two, with the hotspots, we have ordered about 1,000 hotspots, and we do have some wireless sites, and I'll have Mr. De La Calzada talk a little bit more about that. If we do not have hotspots or availability for students, we would include some paper packets. But at this time, I think we're confident that our students will have the devices and the connectivity. David, do you want to address that second part?
Yes, Dr. Alvarez. In terms of connectivity, we do plan to push the Cox Communications Connect to Compete program. They just announced today that they're extending the free service from August through September. And so that announcement will start to proliferate the community tomorrow. Our intent is to get devices to every student and to those that need connectivity at the homes.
Well, that sounds good. I think maybe we should start sending it out today, tonight. The sooner the better. The
Yes,
more
sir.
people can get on there. I think it would be fantastic.
Yes, sir.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Okay, my other question was regarding the communication that parents and students have been receiving emails or phone calls regarding the first day of school and any orientation or anything like that for new students.
Mr. Solis, was that question directed to me?
No, anybody that can answer that question with regards to like orientation and any emails or phone calls or any communication with parents or students for the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, so I don't know if Manny is available, but he has drafted some message that will go out. Given the announcement that went out today regarding Cox Communications, I'll ask that we incorporate that into the message. So he's going to be sending the next one out tomorrow, and sites have been communicating with their families as well. So we'll make sure that we focus on messaging this week. We're going to be sending multiple messages to families to make sure that they're aware that we're a week away from the start of the school year.
Will we be doing phone calls too, or?
Yeah, the robocalls and emails, and we have text messages available. We'll be getting those out starting tomorrow.
With regards to registration for those that haven't been able to go online or register online, is there any other option where they can do a phone call or something along those lines?
Yeah, Dr. Alvarez, would you mind sharing some of the work that is going on over at state and federal?
Sure. But before I do that, I know that individual sites have been actively pursuing different supports for families regarding registration. For example, Southwest Middle contacted every single family that hadn't been able to register, and they did a paper registration over several days. Many of our sites are following similar supports for families. So they're making connections. Some of them are even getting the okay to do the registration online for them. They will walk them through it over the phone, and a staff member will fill in the registration. So there's many of those aspects that are going on. State and federal is also providing connection with parents through our community resource staff to support families as registration is occurring. We will also be opening state and federal for registration so that families can go there to register.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Solis. Mr. Tarantino?
Thank you, President Suhara. Yes, I have a question on slide 9, the second bullet. Before a student can earn a D or F grade in a course, teacher must provide interventions and written notification to the parent or guardian. And where's the accountability in that teachers will be doing that? And will parents be informed that their student cannot receive a D or F if no intervention has been provided? And I have a question about the written notification. In the past, there is a comment on the progress report for anyone who gets a D or an F. Teacher can bubble it in, and it says, student may fail if no improvement. Does that count as written notification to the parent? And if so, then I think the parents need to be made aware that that is the written notification, because a lot of parents don't know that. So 2 questions. Where's the accountability in terms of if a student does get a D or F and there's been no intervention provided, then what happens? And are parents going to be made aware of this provision?
Great question. Thank you. I'm going to start with the second part that you brought up about the written notification and the progress grade being utilized as that function, and that is still in effect. That is a district-wide procedure that we've used in notifying parents, and so that is one method. In this, the providing the interventions happen, of course, at the teacher level, but the accountability isn't just at the teacher level. We're really asking, counselors and our administration to support teachers in reaching students. Many of our teachers have 176 students. We have some PE teachers that may have more than that. And so teachers are, throughout this pandemic, are going to do everything possible to outreach to students and to families. But if they can't make the contact, then we'll have additional supports at the site to provide that intervention. And then if students don't attend the intervention, that's where, they may earn the D or F. Trying to do everything possible that our students don't fall through the cracks. And so those site intervention teams are so crucial during this time so that we're making connections and we're reaching each student.
Thank you. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. Trustee Hall?
Yes, thank you, President Segura. Oh, I think I would give my turn over to the student trustee because I believe she was possibly wanting to speak.
Sure.
I'll go after.
Hi, I have a few questions. Actually, a few students have reached out to me because they expressed that they did not have counselors, and because they didn't have counselors, they weren't able to get their schedules. A lot of students have reached out to me about this, and I'm concerning about the counseling resources part of the presentation. If these students will be accommodated with resources that will make up for them not having a counselor. Also, one particular issue that I was concerned with are the seniors who do not have counselors that may need counseling support for when they apply to colleges, because I know that some of these students who don't have counselors that are applying to colleges come from families who have not gone to college, and that they are the first students in their families to go to college. So I feel like there's a big difference in when students have direct contact with their own counselor versus when a student has access to resources that can help them with their college applications. And I was wondering if we would be able to provide support for those students who are applying to colleges or in the future, like in this upcoming year, when they have to have like inquiries about things school related and they don't have a counselor to go to.
Thank you for those questions.
So it is our intent that the counselors will be available for students. The resources that were mentioned in the PowerPoint, certainly the online resources certainly do not take the place of having a physical counselor. That is a critical component. And so we are doing everything within our power to ensure that our schools are staffed appropriately. And then in terms of, through college applications and those things, definitely throughout the year, counselors provide counseling workshops and other supports to ensure that when the window opens, let's say for the California State Universities or the UCs, that when those windows open, that there's counseling workshops to help students with the application process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Hall?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. It was a good one. One of the concerns I have is about the schedule of the semester schedule versus a quarter schedule, because it's been brought up multiple times to me by not only staff, but some other students and parents, because they're concerned about keeping that rigid schedule and kids becoming overwhelmed. And I'm concerned also because I know I heard 90-minute classes, 30 to 45 minutes every day of synchronous, that's in face-to-face learning. So how much, you talked about flexibility within that schedule. How are you allowing that flexibility with staff? Is it up to the principal to provide that flexibility? Is it up to the teacher to decide when they must be flexible? Or are you saying at this hour you have a class, at this hour of the day you have this class, and this is your schedule and you must adhere to it? But within that, like an hour of class, 90 minutes of class, you can either do it at the beginning of your class, the in-face, or at the end of your class. I mean, I have to understand that a little better, what that flexibility means.
Sure, that's a great question, Mrs. Hall. So, establishing a schedule for distance learning, nothing's optimum. It's difficult. And in the spring, we offered maximum flexibility, but we didn't require any synchronous or face-to-face instruction. Definitely that face-to-face is something that has been, I'm going to say, demanded by our students and by our parents. It is also part of SB 98 that there is, face-to-face interaction. So what we've done is there's flexibility within the 90 minutes, so that 30 minutes of face-to-face instruction can be done at the beginning, at the middle, or at the end, as long as the students know where that's occurring. So for me, it may be more optimum as a teacher to do it at the very beginning. For you as a teacher, it may be more optimum to do it at the end. So it would be established, and that's where that flexibility lies. We know that sometimes there's going to be circumstances where it may be difficult for a teacher because they have young children at home and may not be able to do it at a certain time. So that communication piece is critical. Communication with the student and communication with their administrator so that they know when that instruction is going to occur. We also didn't want students just to sit at a computer and wait for a teacher to come on. There has to be some time certainty for the child or the student so that they could also not have to sit in front of a computer for hours. It's not perfect, but we're trying to adapt to make sure that both the teacher and the student have some flexibility.
Thank you, Dr. And I want to say, Dr. Alvarez, thank you for everything. I know it's been a really heavy lift, a lot of hours, a lot of work, a lot of Zoom meetings or MS Teams, and that in itself can be very wearing. So I appreciate everything you and your staff are doing, and the various people that have been serving on the committees. About the attendance, have you worked out how that's going to be taken, and what have you communicated or prepared a communication for teachers and staff on how that will occur? And the reason, one of the reasons I'm asking, because it's my understanding you said it would be through Infinite Campus, the weekly engagement would be through Infinite Campus.
So the attendance would be through Infinite Campus.
Okay, so the reason why I'm asking, because I was made aware that a substitute doesn't have access to Infinite Campus. So do you have you defined the plan for that, how that's going to roll out to teachers, what the expectations are, and documented that so it's ready for them when they, because I'm being asked by people that don't apparently know.
Yeah, so that plan has not been rolled out yet to the teachers. Teachers don't come on until Wednesday. And so by Wednesday, we will have a plan. There's multiple approaches to the attendance. So student services oversees attendance ultimately. And then IT helps with the accounting of attendance. Of course, my team is working with supporting teachers. So between those three departments, we will have to finalize it. The difficulty that we're having is that some of these attendance regulations came in a lot later. Initially, ADA wasn't going to be affected. Attendance would be done just through, whatever your learning management system is. And we've been contacting the San Diego County Office of Ed to ensure that we're following the correct parameters. So right now we're going with attendance through Infinite Campus. There is a component where you have to measure asynchronous attendance with work product. And so we're trying to ensure that we do that in a manner that's easy to understand. With 1,800 teachers and over 6,000 students, we want to make sure that it's done in the right way. There's just a lot of moving pieces at the same time.
Right, so I get that, and I think you communicated that pretty well at our workshop. What I wasn't sure about is if you're including in that plan how substitute teachers will be accessing any of the programs that are needed for providing instruction, collecting attendance, giving exams, doing all the different things, because it sounds like we have a few people that are on a temporary contract basis, not just day-to-day, visiting teachers.
Mhm.
So I think that's important to address. So
Yeah,
I look forward to learning more when you have it solidified. I hope it's before Wednesday so that there's time for teachers to receive it and review it and ask questions before we actually start opening, school on the 3rd. I have on slide 9 about the grading policy. There is the interventions and supports that you cite and the trauma-informed care strategies. Who's providing that?
So with trauma-informed care, we do have a website that is providing some resources and tools. And then we also have the Student Services Office that has provided training across the board. Our counseling website also has some tools and resources for teachers and students.
So are school psychologists providing any of that support at all? Are they just totally dealing only with special ed populations?
So I'm going to have Dr. Fulcher address that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Anna Maria. I'm a little out of touch with Teams, so appreciate the patience. Our school psychologists will be providing support to primarily kids with support or mental health supports on their IEPs. Rarely do they see students who don't have it listed on their IEPs. On rare occasions, they do. We do have a mental health team, however, that's been in place for a few years, and they can offer some trauma-informed supports and services. And Anna Maria already mentioned the counselors are certainly qualified to provide that service as well. And we have a fair number of teachers who've been trained in trauma-informed practices who could offer some additional resources and services to our students. If something a little more direct is necessary and needed, that I think we do have sufficient staff and staffing to provide the services.
Thank you, Dr. Fulcher. That's good news and nice to see you.
Thank you, likewise.
Okay, so I'm almost finished. I can probably email my questions to Dr. Aguirre, but on the curated resources, Dr. Alvarez, did I hear you say, I want to clarify because I heard you say shelves of courses or shelves of courses. I had to kind of listen in and try to, I couldn't really understand it. If it was SHEVLES or SHELLS. Shelves or shelves?
It's my accent.
No, you speak very clearly.
I'm just joking. So it's shells and SHELLS. And what I meant by that is for each of the content areas, we have all the resources for every single unit for the core classes. And so let's say I'm a biology teacher. I can go into biology A and have outlines of courses, the resources, assessments and supports, and then I can transfer that into my own Google Classroom and make it my own. So that's what I meant by a shell.
Thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned Google Classroom and MS Teams. So when Dr. Fulcher mentioned he's not really that comfortable yet, and I don't think anybody is, especially when the systems freeze up in the middle of talking or whatever. But I'm wondering what kind of professional development support is planned besides the one-day PD offered through the UCSD agreement you have made, which I think is a great opportunity. but what others, so that teachers can really become familiar with the internet, the tools that they have to use for their classroom. I know a lot of things were going on last spring as we transitioned to distance learning, but I don't think everybody is there yet. So is there ongoing professional development, or is there a hotline that people can call? How often are they going to be able to get through to get a real assistance? And I don't think it's just for teachers, it's for staff, it's for our parents, it's for our teachers. I think we really need a Genius bar that's open for 24/7 almost, so that people can call and get a voice to hear, to really offer a personalized assistance, because as we struggle through these things, it really is key, especially when you consider a student sitting at, like you said, in front of a screen with nobody there. It can be very frustrating and disappointing, and then parents get frustrated. So how are we going to deal with that? Is there a plan for that going forward? And I know everything costs money, but to me, this is really a priority.
Definitely. So we have a couple of approaches. The first one is the opening PD. So we have the UCSD training, but then we also have training specific to the tools that we're using. And with those tools, we will be going over the Google platform on how to use that, how to connect students, how to use, the grading systems. All of those are included in our professional development. So one of the half days, 2 hours of that is related to some content specific PD, and then also the tools necessary to do video conferencing. And then for students, we also have, and students and parents, we have a website that has tutorials that are videotaped on how to access, how to troubleshoot. And so those websites clearly walk through that. And then the third is we are developing a hotline for support,
Awesome.
where there will be someone to support.
I know that I brought this up last time, I think too, was about having an instructor, really more than just an IT person. There's probably a need for both sides, a teacher type and a person with real deep knowledge about the functionality of the tools to be available to respond to questions and things. So is that PD happening next week before
so the
classes?
The PD starts this Wednesday.
Okay, good.
And it's staggered depending on, we're doing 2 different cohorts depending on the day that the team is doing the UCSD training. Opposite of that will be the other training. So
Okay.
we'll be able to do that.
Thank you, Trustee Hall. Let me get a couple questions in there.
Oh yeah, I'm finished. Believe me, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for those questions and the answers. So, Dr. Alvarez, I mentioned in the last, when we talked about this at the workshop, and I'm concerned about the equity, with our students, as you are, as everybody is, with students who, there's multiple kids at home and there's only so much bandwidth, and they're not able to get on, and and miss a class, and so you've addressed it in you've addressed it in flexibility, and that's really, to me, that's really key in this our whole online learning process, even with with teaching and with assessing the students, is really kind of where I'm concerned about, is that it's not going to be so I'm glad that the students are going to be held accountable for their grades, but just hoping that the teachers will be able to, their grading practices will, be able to include some equitable grading practices, in that. Because that's just really one of my big concerns, is and I hope the flexibility. I know it's going to, I guess you could say this is a living document, because as we move through it, we're going to you'll be having to do some adjustments, and I know, they wouldn't work if this was a static, but this is it, and this is the way it's going to be. But it's going to have to be modified as we make our way through this. And I really don't think that if we were to take another 2 weeks, it's going to really make that much difference, doing a kickoff. We really need to I think we're going to really know what we're really going to need and fine tune it by kicking off the school year and moving forward. That's how I see it. I don't know if that's you agree with that, but I just think the flexibility is really key. And I just, hope that that's going to really happen.
No, I absolutely agree with you. Even in the best of circumstances, our diverse learners always need additional supports, and we want to ensure that both teachers, parents, and students understand that accountability doesn't mean that there's not comprehension and compassion and empathy. And so it's critical that we communicate with our families and that we understand what our students are going through as we go through this semester. Entering distance learning now, we are the first district in the county to start school. And so we want to make it right, but we have to start somewhere, and we're starting here with the best of intentions and the best plans with the information that we have right now.
I would agree with that. Do we have any more questions from the board? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve G8 or G9.
G6.
G6. Dang it, strike 3.
So moved.
I'll second. Call for the vote.
Adamos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. So we can move to G9.
G7?
G7, I am just really not circling the right things here.
It's pulled by
G7.
Mr. Tarantino.
Mr. Tarantino, go ahead, sir.
Yes. I had a question about the Launch Academy. When it was first introduced, I remember somewhere that I remember hearing that the students who enrolled in the Launch Academy would have to stay enrolled in Launch Academy for the entire year. Is that still something that's being considered, or is it something that they have to stay for at least a semester, and then what are the parameters for that if they feel that it's just not working for them?
I'd be glad to address that, if you like. Yeah, so thank you for that question, President Tarantino, because the precedent is once you're the president, you can always be the president. So I'm just saying that.
I don't think it works in this situation, but thank you though for the thought.
So yeah, the Launch Academy, we first got interest from a community about a month ago and saw there was quite a bit of interest, but many folks at that time were stating that they were only wanting to be in Launch until it was safe to go back to school. So we're trying to differentiate our support for families and let them know that distance learning will provide that for you. And thus we asked for the 1-year commitment to Launch, so people weren't going back and forth looking at the health conditions, because we believe that our distance learning plan will keep folks safe until we have the health situation under control. So we are asking for that 1-year commitment.
Thank you. And then the other question I had was about the AP classes. So are we recruiting teachers that have AP training into the Launch Academy, or are we going to provide the AP training, which is basically required for someone to teach an AP class, or get a waiver for them? How does that get to work, Dr. Winter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, we are hoping to attract teachers, and I know some that are interested who have AP experience, and our goal would be to offer those classes with those teachers who have already been to the training and taught the class. So there will be some limitations in terms of what we can offer, being that we will only have between 10 and 13 teachers to start this year. So we'll offer what we can, and if in time, we'll be able to train more teachers to increase that offering as time goes by. Thanks.
Is that Mr. Tarantino? Or yes, you're good? Okay, so that was G7. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve G7.
Second.
Second by Mr. Solis. Call for the vote, please.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Ike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
And G9.
Yes. Pulled by Ms.
So I-
Hall and Mr. Tarantino.
Oh, cool. I meant to pull it too. I'm glad you trustees pulled it. Go ahead, Mrs. Hall.
Thank you, President Segura. So on this, it talks about, I really think it's a great thing to train teachers about human trafficking prevention. I totally support that. What I'm curious about, it talks about one teacher from each school for 3 years will attend a 2-day professional development. What happens if the teachers change schools?
So
That's my first question. My
Okay.
second question was who determines which teachers are selected for this program?
So thank you. Great questions, Mrs. Hall. The grant was written for 7th grade science teachers and for high school health teachers. And so the intent is that by the time the grant goes through a 3-year cycle, we will have trained 84 teachers and they will become the trainer of trainers. So they will train other site teachers. And with, as with anything, if someone moves, we can have staff support the training for the site teachers.
Thank you. And my last question was about, is this $16,850 the total amount for 3 years?
That's a good question. I think it covers the substitutes cost, so it should cover the substitutes for those 3 years.
Correct. So how are you going to guarantee the money is, I mean, I suppose you need a plan to make sure that the money is only budgeted for each fiscal year so that it doesn't get spent all in one year or the other before the 3-year period is. And my question would be to Dr. Sawkild really about the coding for this budget, because I would think it needs to be a local resource, not in the general fund where it kind of gets swallowed up and you can't really track it. Is that the plan?
Correct. We'd have to code that particular grant or that funding source on a local basis with its own identifiers noted with the resource, so we can track it year to year.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Tarantino?
Yes, I had a question about, is this going to include sites in alt ed as well, in terms of those teachers that teach health? So would the teacher from Palomar, for example, would the teacher from Options, would the teacher, those kinds of programs, would they also be included in this?
Definitely the 712 teachers would be included.
Okay.
We, at this point, are not including the adult education because it is targeted to 712, looking at human trafficking of minors in particular.
Yeah. I was just wondering if it would be extended to alt ed. Thank you for that answer. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, President Segura.
Thank you. I had no questions with this. I just wanted to thank the Rotary Cup for sponsoring this, and helping us train our teachers in this very important human trafficking prevention. So that's all I had. I'll make a motion to approve or accept.
I will second the motion.
Second.
I moved. Trustee Hall, second. Call for the vote.
Ramos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
L3.
H2. You pulled H2.
Oh, cool. Let me find that. H2. Let me see if I can find my notes. Oh, my question was, I wanted to know who our liaison was, or who Sweetwater's liaison for our foster youth ed liaison.
So that's Dr. Mariana Gomez.
Outstanding. I couldn't remember who that was. So that's all I wanted to understand. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Solis, seconded by Hall. Call for the vote.
Adamos,
Yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
L3.
Yes, I have one speaker for L3.
Okay.
The comments are from Kathleen Cheers. Good evening. It is a move in the right direction to assign this position to a lower pay grade. I do, however, question the pay grade you are lowering it to. My recommendation would be manager at an even lower pay grade due to the fact you incurred the expense of adding general counsel when you took office, with the commitment doing so would save educational dollars. I would like an open forum discussion on what your future plans are in regards to filling the position left vacant when Dr. Glover retired, including a full job description and qualifications needed to be considered in filling the position. The community is tiring of personnel being promoted based on the perception of repaid favors. Remember when we have been there, done that for many years, up to and including Gondara's reign. Hopefully the intent is to not promote an untrained, unqualified principal in repayment for simply carrying the water. To all teachers, counselors, staff, I caution you, pay attention to what is going on. Just like with the recent rifts, it is pretty clear lines were drawn, and rather than union leadership sticking together and doing what was best for students and all employees, by agreeing to furlough days, SEA leadership chose secret plans with little regard paid to the negative impact on all of you. It is a hard truth that raises this board. It is a hard truth the raises this board gave out is indeed the cause for all this mess. Yet they stood at the podium and attempted to play victim. In closing, it is most sad that after all those years of struggle to reclaim the Sweetwater good name, once again we have returned to the very days we stood side by side to fight against. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not you have earned it, but you played the game to get it. It's not we all stand for quality education of our deserving students. It's what's in it for me, to hell with what is right. All of this mess may not involve you as an individual now, but sooner or later you will fall victim to the poor leadership, dysfunctional board of trustees, and the reality your hard work, and your loyalty doesn't truly mean a thing. Unfortunately, you are pawns. There are no further comments. The item was also pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Mr. Tarantino?
Yes, I have a question. So from a rudimentary calculation, I've calculated that the savings of this downgrade would be anywhere from $32,406 to about $40,000. So I guess my question is, are we using this as an example of from the top, which were advocated by the certificated associations?
So thank you, Trustee Tarantino. The math is going to depend on the ultimate individual and years of service and things like that. So I think the rough order of magnitude is about right, 30 to 40,000. I think this is something that keeping in alignment with trying to be prudent without affecting a person, rather a position, and there's a vacancy. So there's an opportunity to use that vacancy without affecting people. And so it kind of keeps in alignment with that path that we've been down.
Yeah, I completely appreciate that. I'm just wondering if there was such a clamor from our certificated associations and from public comment to cut from the top. Are we going to say that this is a cut from the top?
Well, regardless, where the advocacy was coming from, again, that's what this is. This is, we're making reductions when there's an opportunity to make a reduction without affecting people. And so it's kind of in alignment with the approach that was taken during furloughs or whatnot. I mean, furloughs during the CERP, the early retirement.
So thank you for those questions, Mr. Tarantino. I would just straight out say that I would consider this a cut from the top, and I fully support this. And I think this is a way to do it without harming anybody who's in those positions now. I wouldn't want to do that, but I think this is a good move, and I fully support that. And if we have no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second the motion.
Moved and second. If there are no more questions, we go to a vote.
Ramos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Let me see if I get the last one right. Q1?
No, 03, sir. You pulled 03.
I don't know where I wrote Q1 down here, and
Q1 is the last item, yes.
I promise to do better. Can you put it up on the screen so I could see it again? I might have pulled the wrong one. Yes, so no, I actually wanted to pull this one, believe it or not. So my question was, I appreciate our partnership with the Los Angeles Regional Food Bank. I was just kind of curious if we know how much food they'll be able to, I don't know if they measure it in tons or what, to help feed our families, and I really appreciate that. And was wondering if we had any contacts with the San Diego Food Bank, and if not, I have some contacts there. I think anything that we can get that we could distribute to our community would be greatly appreciated.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for that question. So we get about 400 cases of pork and dairy per week. There's no cost to the district, and we currently have 3 sites that are receiving this service that's associated to this board item.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and it comes from LA. I will have to ask the question about San Diego Local Food Bank, and we can get back to you on that and
Sure.
see what active partnerships we have available with them.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Is that the last one?
I'll make a motion to approve, though.
Second. Move to second. Call for the vote.
Ramos?
Yes.
Hall?
Yes.
Solis?
Yes.
Pike?
Yes.
Segura?
Yes.
Tarantino?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Q1.
Yes, sir. Pulled by Mr. Tarantino.
Ooh, got something right. You're muted, sir.
Sorry. In resolution 2483 and 2484, there is reference to the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. And I'm wondering if, because of the motion that passed, that we should make an amended motion to include the new title, which would be the Chief, Chief Human Resources Officer. Or does this have to come back to us because of what we passed?
Dr. Sacco, can you address that?
So in regards to the recent change, yes, we can modify that particular resolution to reflect this new position or the modified position from assistant to chief HRO.
Okay, I would then offer a motion to
Mr.
amend.
Tarantino,
Yes.
prior to making that motion from a legal perspective and working with the clerk of the board, we would request that once a person is in this position, or at least at the next board meeting, we could bring back the resolutions that are impacted, as there are some that you passed tonight that are on consent, as well as some potential others. So we can do it in one clean package, as opposed to modifying one piece of it tonight and still having to bring something back at the next meeting, now that we know you did approve this item.
I'm okay with that. I will move approval of Q1 as written.
Second.
A motion to approve Q1 as written, and we'll call for the vote.
Ramos,
Sorry, yes.
Hall,
Yes.
Solis,
Yes.
Pike,
Yes.
Segura,
Yes.
Tarantino.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
So that is it.
You
Correct?
can adjourn the meeting.
Okay, so we are officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody. And thanks for everybody's input and everybody's hard work. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right.
Good night.